And we're live. Good morning and welcome to the special meeting of the Oxford Preparatory Academy Board of Directors on August 9th, 2025, 9:30 a.m. open session and 3 p.m. closed session. Teleconference locations are at OPA Middle School and Saddleback Valley on Lemont Drive and OPA SOC on Via Santa Maria. Public comment opportunities. Members of the public may make comments at regular meetings of the Board of Directors regarding closed session items, agendized items, and non-agendized items. Comments may be made in person or via Zoom teleconference. Please turn in a comment card to the Executive Director, Dr. Kimberly Fricker. Requests to comment may also be submitted via electronic submission or email. Submissions must be received prior to the start of the applicable community input time. If members of the public wish to email comments to be read during the meeting, please email them to publiccomment@opaschools.org by 9:30 a.m. on August 9th, 2025. Public comments, including email comments, shall be limited to 3 minutes per comment with up to 20 minutes of public comment per topic on the agenda. Board members cannot respond when a public comment is given except to refer a matter to staff for resolution or place it on a future board agenda for more substantive conversation and or action. Under the Brown Act, public comment is a one-way conversation and cannot be acted upon by the board at this meeting. All comments are captured and will be followed up on accordingly. Reasonable accommodation. With at least 48 hours notice, any individual with a disability who requires reasonable accommodation to participate in a board of directors meeting may request assistance by contacting public comment over schools or 497-600-9040. The video and audio records of this
Nobody likes to comment. Yes. Good job reading. Yeah, I know, it's perfect. You're getting it down. No, I hated it when we would purposely come 15 minutes late just so I didn't have to do it. Strategic.
I turned up the volume.
Okay.
Just
Okay, good job. Nice fixing. Is it because there's a delay? That why?
We've never had this, I've never had that problem.
okay.
All right.
I'm gonna keep.
She has to finish.
The public may attend the board meeting in person or via Zoom, via the following Zoom webinar. https://oxfordchampions.zoom.us/j/32032462335 meeting ID 320-324-6235. Call to order. Meeting was called to order by the board president at 9:42 a.m. We will do roll call now. Member Travis. Here. Member Smith is here. Member Freiler. Here. Member Shaw.
Here.
Member Caution.
here.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda for the Oxford Preparatory Academy special meeting of the Board of Directors. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve the agenda for the special meeting of the Oxford Preparatory Academy Board of Directors on August 9th, 2025. May I get a motion and a second?
I'll motion. I'll second.
Yeah, who am I getting a second to?
So now,
Member Shaw.
I'm quick this morning.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? Right, let's do flag salute. Have a volunteer? Okay,
Everybody ready? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
community input, members of the public may comment on items listed on the agenda or non-agendized items only. The speaker may not relinquish their time to another person. Do we have any comments on agenda or non-agendized?
We do not.
All right, items for presentation and discussion. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Fricker to introduce our guests and get us going on these items.
So welcome to what is a board workshop where we have some items on the agenda. I just want to introduce Dr. Sun, who will be leading the board workshop and going through the agendized items, as well as Catlin, who will also be assisting. So welcome to the two of you.
Hi. All right, we're ready to get started. That introduction took half my time, so we're gonna be going really quickly here. All right, so great to see you all. Great to see you all in person. This is awesome. And thank you so much for spending your Saturday here. It's really important work that you're doing. And so part of this commitment to making sure that OPA continues to thrive, it's your time and commitment and dedication and attention to what we're doing today. All right, so we're just going to start with a quick warm-up activity, and we're going to make this really quick. And what I'd like you to do is turn to an elbow partner. I think that might be the quickest. Well, actually, no, you know what? You're already divided in three. Let's do in threes, right? So what I'd like you to do is share the story of your name, all right? So what I mean, every name has a story to it. And so just to get you started, I'll share with you the story of my name. All right. So my name is Ting Lan San. In Chinese, it gets flipped backwards to Sun Lan Ting. My father's name was Humphrey Sun, my mother's name Joan Sun, and my brother's name David Sun. So why am I Ting Sun? Right? Why didn't I not get an American name? Well, the story is, and I don't quite remember this, is that when we became naturalized citizens when I was about 9 years old, I think the story is that I absolutely refused to change my name. I absolutely refused an English name, so American name. So I decided to keep Ting. And I kept Ting Sun for my entire life, and I will always be Ting Sun. That's the story of my name. Okay, so a lot of this workshop is going to be you kind of being a little casual and all that. So it's not like a formal board meeting that you're used to. So get together in your three groups. You're going to only have about 8 minutes. So you got to share fast. Okay, share fast. The story of your name. Okay, what? Go.
My name
Go.
but my parents didn't want me to call
I have the most interesting.
Yeah. You can start with your story.
Okay, so Ashcon is a. Assuming Ashcon is, I'll do the means of my story. So my name is Samir, and Ashcon on China State's culturally first hired amongst your fathers. So they decided to have boys name that was to my name, and your husband, and last name does not look, I don't usually as close as it does. So I like the middle name. My dad used to be. When we came always writes the names like everything. People look every segment like Ashcon, like so it's like a. When you go in that, and then for it looked like a word that you could read.
Oh, yeah.
Like head with head. So anyway, my last. We did it for my son devoted to is like this nomadic tribe, and every one of these tribe.
Will Smith's married name, so I'm not gonna talk about that. Boring. But me,
Like
actually,
when
when I was born, she was a teen mother, and in hospital, she decided to leave me. And so the doctor.
and so there you go. But say growing up it was
Parents, like all my parents, I've been looking for a baby for like 8 years. So he called up and said, actually, you're responsible, it doesn't have. You should go, if you want her, he said, oh, okay, with no inspiration.
Well, you can have, you know, I have.
I didn't come on that day. They didn't have anything. He was. That moment in time, top of my.
So my mom knew someone named White, and she really pissed on it, and so she really liked any fans. And so I wish I had a previous her name, they're not heavy, they're not cheating, they're not, she just someone. And she's like, that's the name I want to do. My middle name is Heather, and so my name means happy young, and my last maiden name was Young, so my whole name was Happy Young, or Happy. She makes it up, so it's like Happy Young Flower. Because my middle name is Heather, so it's she always just like, you're like Happy Young Flower. And so that was what my name is to be.
Of course, how are you doing? I'm May. How I got my name Kimberly, but my middle name is May.
Oh, there you go.
What about your last name?
Sometimes I think about my maiden name back into my name.
And so I don't know the
Smith
descent,
is
like
so
where it comes from, so.
So when I changed it.
My husband has it, so my married name is
My
Travis.
mother
And he's a direct descendant of General Travis from home. Yeah, and he's like traced it back, I mean,
And I
it's
also
like farther
think
to
about
what his family did that
generation
nation.
history and records.
So, yeah, it's
I don't
very
know.
cool, his whole side of the family is like
I
no.
know.
So a couple years ago,
Just
just like Alma, just to show the family.
Maybe
like,
not more
yeah,
excited,
so they have that story.
Like.
So, but yeah, like he had that. I just thought, yeah. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, you have a cool too, you like you.
Yeah, I might do
You
that.
know,
But you know, when they merged, they made a new list. We took part of their.
So did you guys, did everyone get a chance to share? Sorry to kind of rush you through this a little bit, but we wanted to kind of get to everything today. So, how many of you learned something new about one of your colleagues? Oh, every single one of you, right? So that speaks to taking a little time sometimes, because I know you get into these board meetings and you're like, right, and then you get to business and then you get out of the meeting. So it's always nice to stop a little bit. And one of the reasons I started with this exercise, one is that when you tell the story of your name, you really learn about a person's history as well and their origins and all that. And that's always really great. But because today's workshop, today's training, if you will, is not really technical. It's not about technical knowledge or anything. It's actually about relationships. And it's about how you learn to work with each other, both with each other on the board, but also with the staff and with management as well. So one of the overlying themes for today is going to be trust. And so let me just tell you, just set up the little scene here about trust. So some of you know, I just went on a 2-week tour of 3 Scandinavian countries in July. So we went to Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And those countries, those Scandinavian countries, you always hear about how they rank as high in like the happiest places to live, right? You hear a lot about that, right? They are, right? And so why is it a happy place to live? Especially since most of the winter, they get no more than 6 hours of sunlight. So it's dark for a good chunk of the year there. So why is it the happiest place on earth? Or some of the happiest places to live? So as we were going through these tours, I asked one of the tour guides when we were in Denmark, and I said, well, why do you think your rank's this high? And she paused and she thought a little bit. She said, we trust each other. We trust each other. I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting because we live in a society and live in a world right now where there is a deficit of trust. You hear of politics, you hear a lot of things, right? There's a deficit of trust. So I thought, oh, okay, well, that's very interesting. And then I happened to be attending a conference in Stockholm as well. And the presenters there also picked up on this theme of trust. And so I thought it was very, very interesting. So my thing just intermittently works and doesn't work. I think you have to put that one on the main thing. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. There's my share story name. All right. So trust. So trust is our theme here. All right. So here's the thing about trust. Trust is a system. And trust involves the decision to act in the presence of uncertainty. So the trust piece of it comes with also uncertainty. So if you guys are familiar with Brene Brown's work, she talks about courage. There's no courage without vulnerability and without fear. There's no courage without fear. And so there's no trust without uncertainty. All right, so how do you learn to be trust? So interesting enough, one of the presenters said, trust is like gas station sushi. Right. And he tells a story about how he lives in Vancouver, so they have sushi. He loves sushi, right? And he was driving through a small town in like the Midwest or something. And he went into this gas station and he saw sushi there. And he said, it looked pretty darn good. And I was like, I hadn't had sushi in a while, it looked really, really good. And he said, I just contemplated it, and then he decided not to get it. And so why, right? He says, why is Trust like gas station sushi? Because he said, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. I don't know when it was delivered. I don't know who made it. I didn't know anything of the background of it, right? So key here is that in order to build trust, you got to get to know, right? You have to know more about whoever or whatever it is. So that's why today we have this exercise on color personality. That's where we're going with, right? So overarching theme today, think about as trust. Trust is the decision to act in the presence of uncertainty. You're all high professionals here. You want control. You want to be certain of everything. But I will tell you one thing in education, I've been in this business 35 plus years. It's always, there's no certainty in any of this. Right. So we're going to go into the color personality piece. I'm going to go over these slides very, very quickly. You have access to the slides, so if you ever wanted to go back again to take a look at it, the purpose of this is to help you get to know each other better, right? Which then also builds trust. So this is based on traits, and it's so traits are those kind of behaviors that are kind of inherent in your DNA. And then also characteristics, which are learned behaviors and based on people's experiences and all that. So you each were asked to do your survey. You guys all did it, right? Right? You did your homework? Okay. All right. So you were asked to indicate your core personality, and the next highest is how you kind of cope with it. So you should have your numbers in the back. So take a look at that. This is not just like a fun exercise, so we could do colors and all that. This is actually very much based on brain research. The left and the right, and here I am, I'm talking about this, and there are two doctors in here, and I just feel like, okay, I'm just like kind of faking it, okay? So, so there's left and right, and this is done by work of Carol Rickberg. And so again, I'm going through these really, really quickly. Want to think about how so the colors help us understand better how you gather information. If you're kind of a red orange, you gather information through your five senses. The information has to make sense to you. If you're yellow green, you seem to rely more on your gut, onto intuition. And again, not to pigeonhole anybody into any specific color, but this is kind of your tendency, right? Your tendency on how you act. And then if you're left or right brain, depending on this, if you're red or yellow, you make decisions based on more impersonal analysis. You're more logical in that way. If you're orange green, you make decisions more on how you feel about something. All right. So that's some background. All right, so the big reveal, what color are you? So we're gonna go around.
Should we do that while we're down?
Yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say, you're gonna help with your distribution.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you can have, so, all right, so we're gonna go around the table. We're gonna start with some here. What color?
Green.
You are green, okay.
We were all
You're
very close to
green,
one another.
yes. Okay.
Orange.
You are, Betty, I would have guessed you were an orange. So,
Yellow.
you are yellow, yellow, I get you. Yes.
I don't know, it's not, is that yellow?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you tend to be more yellow, but you're pretty evenly distributed. Yellows,
Were your numbers close?
yellows are.
We're all like on digital.
No.
Right.
Before.
I know you're so weird.
I've done this a couple times, so.
Okay, you're red. All right.
Oh, then we have orange.
You're orange. Oh, I could have guessed. All right. There you go. All right. Caitlin, what are you?
Wait, no.
I was green.
You were green.
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're green like myself. All right, so everyone's got their little big color thing. All right, I am on yellow, and then I took the test again last night just to check, and I'm still yellow. But I used to be brighter yellow when I was an administrator, and now I'm a little bit more evened out. My greens come out a little bit more, I think, through some of the work. All right, so just again, gonna go over kind of tendencies, and again, not to pigeonhole you. Some of you may have numbers that are pretty even spaced out, and that's great. You're kind of operating in all of these different ways, which is all good. But talking about just tendency, right? And what you tend to default to if you're trying to make a quick decision or you're trying to. All right, reds. Reds. All right. You're practical, predictable, you're hardworking, and dependable. You're about the rules, man. You're about the rules. Not just a rule, competitive. Okay. You're not about emotion, but you're about like getting the work done, right? You're going to it. I used to have a red as our student affairs director, which means he took care of discipline. And my gosh, walk on the grass. I mean, talk about military people, a lot of reds and military people. He tended to be a really like hard line kind of guy. And I tell you, those kids snapped to it. And some people didn't quite like his style. He would kind of get on some people's, he would hurt a lot of feelings, you know, when that, because of the way he was. At the same time, I tell you, if we had an emergency, he was the guy that you would go to. Every single person would say, okay, if I trusted anyone to lead us through an emergency, it would be Pat Barton. Okay, so he was our red. So for reds, how do you communication by red? All right, maybe time you do a red, just present the facts. Just the facts, man. All right. Don't give me a bunch of extra stuff. Stress how the information will benefit them. All right. They need to know what it is. State facts, not opinions. This is what never waste their time. Minimize small talk, and then expect frankness and bluntness back. All right. So that's a communication style of a red. Orange. All right. Let's all get along, right? A lot of feelings and emotions here. It's about harmony, community. Oranges do really, really well in a place where it's very symbiotic in how they like to give and they like to receive. Oranges really appreciate that. They're polite. They want to be appreciated. They're peacemakers. They like to build relationships with people and don't like conflict. Like to avoid conflict. In that same admin team, I had a red. I also had an orange. And she was the one where it's like, okay, we need to get some gifts for the custodial staff. She was on it. So oranges she was great at building culture and community. Sometimes the accountability stuff was a little bit difficult. She had to channel her inner red for that. But she did a great job with that. So I had a red and I had an orange on my team. So to communicate with orange, be friendly and considerate of their feelings. Talk about people concerns. Be clear what you need and if they are responsible to providing it. All right. Notice who is an orange. Right here, right? All right. If you sense you have stepped on their toes, ask them to share their feelings. Appeal to their caring nature. They want to help. They want to support. They want to help. And then if you criticize them, say something positive too. Balance that out, right? So understanding how you communicate with an orange. All right, yellows. It's me. All right, I'm totally about logic, intuition. I balance the two. I see big pictures. I question. I'd like being intellectually challenged. And then independent, yes, perfectionist, kind of worshipful critic. And the critique there is that it could be analysis paralysis. Because oftentimes balancing, oh, I can see it this way, I can see it that way, it is hard to make a decision. All right. Okay, so that's pretty much yellow. I don't know, Amy, kind of agree?
100%.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Very cool. All right, communication by color, always expect to ask questions, okay, and like play devil's advocate.
See y'all this
All right, focus on the big picture, present several different options, okay? I don't want to just be told this is the one thing. I like to know what are my options. Challenge their problem skills, give them time to mull over ideas, and then keep objective clear, push for clarity, and avoid talking around the problem. Just get to the point, kind of led in that way, right? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a yellow. That's a yellow. Green. Greens are master jugglers. They operate a lot of emotion and intuition. Really like the relationship aspects, social contract. They're creative, cheerleaders, spontaneous. They're the fun people in school. Right? They're also chameleon, right? They can adjust and they can do, they can kind of be in a lot of different situations and adjust with how things go. Timelines are negotiable, right, Samir? And then, you sometimes may not finish sentences. I don't know why, but, and then, they also don't like conflict, like oranges. I don't like getting into confrontation, kind of like want to more go with the flow type of thing, right? So, I will tell you that, well, let me go into, okay, so when you communicate with a green, never dismiss or discount their feelings. Don't take an authoritarian attitude. Don't bog them down with details, but ask them to share their feelings. Ask open-ended questions and don't talk down to them because their feelings do get hurt very easily. I will tell you that 80% of educators, teachers, 85% maybe are greens. Right? I did this with my entire staff years back, and sea of greens all out there, right? And so as a yellow, sometimes when I'm talking to a teacher and they're like, oh, I didn't talk to this parent and the parent, blah, 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 and I'll just want to go, okay, can we get to the facts, right? Because they really want to just express their emotions and they want to go, and it's like, okay, and I've had to learn to say, I need to hear them out. I need to hear them out because they have the feelings and it's valid. It's valid to them. It's their truth. So if I want to build trust, I have to take the time. I have to take the time to understand where they're coming from, right? So hopefully what this has done, I'm trying to keep us on time, what this has done is help you to understand a little bit about each other. And what's awesome is that we've got colors. Among this board here, you've got every single color. And again, this is not to pigeonhole you in any specific way. It's just for you to have a little bit better awareness when you're communicating with each other. And then when you're making decisions, how you kind of jump to or what you naturally tend to rely on in your decision-making process. And so this really talks how you can talk to each other and how you communicate with each other. Okay, any questions about this? I've been talking at you for a while here. Any questions or thoughts, reflections of this exercise here? No?
I'll say, to define it in this way, I had a few ahas now and reflecting on the way we communicate and then maybe how things might have gone differently had we known like, oh, this person
Yeah.
reacts better to this or that.
Yeah.
So,
Very good. Good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any others? All right. All right. We're going to go right next to, okay, now that you guys have each other, you guys on board, you're all kind of warmed up a little bit. Here, we're going to start going into some information. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to do when I spoke with each of you is for you to understand your role in the context of the big, big picture, okay? Yellow is like this, so hopefully this will help you guys understand a little bit more and that each of the other colors will be able to take something out of this context. So I've been in charter schools with it for a very, very long time. I started in Natomas Charter School when I was 28 years old. I had just been a teacher for 5 years. And the charter law came in effect in 1992, 93. And I thought, okay, I'm a teacher, I can start my own school, cool, right? And totally naive, totally innocent, but it was back in the heyday when charters were really about this license to dream. And I always put this up here because I want you guys to understand, even 30 years later, it is still your license to dream. It's your license to dream about where education can be. Okay, so. All right, thank you. Are you moving it for me? Thank you so much. Okay. All right, so this is a cut from the original charter school conference, License to Dream. Going. All right, so I always put the preamble of the charter law. All these years, all these changes to the law, this preamble has pretty much not changed. It's the constitution of charter schools. And I've highlighted some very, in red, what I think is some of the more important aspects of the charter preamble and charter law. The purpose of it, improve pupil learning. If you're only accomplishing what the other schools are doing, why bother, right? You're supposed to be about improving student learning. So I'm going to just go in my important ones. So encourage the use of different and innovative teaching methods. Innovation is key. New professional opportunities for teachers, okay, including responsibility for site-based decision-making and decision-making into the school. This is a very opposite of what we see in traditional education, right? Traditional education is about top-down. This was supposed to be about bottom-up. And then hold these schools established under this part accountable for meeting measurable student outcomes and providing schools with a method to change from rule-based to performance-based accountability. This is super important. It's not about what you do, it's what your results are, okay, in the end. And so as you are thinking about your role, as we talked today through roles and responsibilities about what you as a board do, keep this in mind. Okay. Next. All right. I'm going to skip through these really quickly. You know, actually chartering as a way to reform actually came up in the 1970s. And it became popular in education. It takes forever for anything to catch on. So if you could go again, thank you. So changing education from a commodity to learning as an experience, going on. And then there's two concepts. Please, 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 if you remember this, two concepts. One, advanced one, thank you. Charters are not educational innovations. They are organizational innovations. It's not about the content of education, because frankly, you know, kids and teachers, I mean, in a classroom, we've been doing that for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Thousands of years, if you will. But this is about how you organize yourself to be different. Okay, and then the next one is charters are independent public schools. So when you talk about yourself as a charter school, you say, we're a public charter, we're a public school. Super important because there's in the public, and Calvin can speak to this a lot, people just mix it, oh, private school. They think automatically it's a private school. No, we're tuition free. No, but you have this different way of doing things. You've got to be private. No. We're public school. The whole point of charters was to create innovation within the charter public school system. In fact, we weren't supposed to have a bunch of independent charter schools. We were actually supposed to have school districts that had independent schools within a district structure. The original concept behind chartering was not about breaking up and having all these independent schools that have to provide their own special ed and have to do all their own finances and all that. It was to live within a school district structure where you had the infrastructure of finance and the economies of scale and all that, but that within a district portfolio, you didn't have teachers doing the same curriculum over and over again. But you had a school over here that could do something in the performing arts, and then you had another school within the district portfolio that could do technology. You were supposed to have a portfolio of very different types of schools, and that's why we charter through a district. But as charters have evolved and as the movement have evolved, political pressures, all of that has caused charters to have to remain independent and to increase in the innovation. They've had to be kind of nudged, if you will, out of the larger system. And unfortunately, now kind of got a bunch of well, fortunately and unfortunately, we have a bunch of like independent charter schools that sometimes, especially if they're small, really struggle because they don't have the background infrastructure. So remember, charters are choice, autonomy, and accountability. Okay, next one. Oh, that didn't turn out well. Okay, maybe.
Coming into focus.
Yeah, okay. This was clear on the thing, but okay, so this is what I mean about as an organizational innovation. So traditional districts start here. They start with, this is a district structure. We have a board, we have superintendent, we have associate superintendents, we have directors, then we have these, and then at the very bottom here, we have schools. And then we have teachers, and then we have students, and then parents are kind of here, right? So that's the way that traditionalists, they start with the organization and then they go all the way down to the students. Charter schools are from right to left. Charter schools start with student results, then they build their instructional approach to get to that result. Then they build their theory of action on how to get to those results. Then they build the organization around that. So there's lots of charter schools that have taken on the mantra of the executive director being superintendent and all that, because they're kind of falling into this like paralleling the traditional system, because sometimes it's required because people just don't understand what is an executive director, or if you call them a chancellor, what exactly is that, right? But we have to resist what the traditional system has already set for us, because our whole purpose was to change it, right? To be a little bit different. All right, so organization over there. Any questions about what I've talked about so far? Shall we move on? Does this make sense? Okay, very good. All right, so here now we need to grapple a little bit. Okay, I'm right here, let me just making sure. Oh, I have plenty of time. All right, so over the last 30 years or so in the charter schools movement, a lot of things that we started out back in the 1990s have happened already. So we have something now called, we used to have, we're independent in our funding, and we can manage our own funds. Now we have local control accountability formula. We used to do a lot of site-based decision-making, but now there's more site-based decision-making in our schools, in our traditional schools, right? CTE pathways, multiple measures on the dashboard, 21st century schools, the LCAP. The LCAP, by the way, before it became the monster that it is today, it was kind of like a little mini charter where you kind of put out what your goals are and your strategic plan and how you're going to achieve those. The LCAP became much more than that. But a lot of these pieces that used to be unique in charters are no longer so unique anymore. So what makes you so different now? Keep going. All right, so decade 3, questions you as a board should be grappling with is, what learning impacts are we making? What is our value add now to this community? How are we driving change in the education system? What is our aspirational good, right? I used to tell my staff, anybody at the beginning of the year, we do the staff orientations or bring new staff in, like when you chose to work in a charter school, you chose to become an educational reformer. Sorry, it wasn't on the job description, but that is what you do. That is what you do. You've chosen to be an educational reformer. Okay, next one. All right, so I was asked to just provide a quick, so what's on the horizon, right? So we've taken you 30 years to present, grappling with these questions about where we want to be 3 to 5 years from now. How does that work in the context of OPA, your work as a board? I've included an EdSource article for you all to read. It just provides a little bit of context for where charters are, I think politically and all that. So know that charter school enrollment since post-pandemic has risen in comparison to the traditional system in California. We've had a lot of students leave California, right? A lot of people move out of California, but percentage-wise, charters are growing at a higher percentage because people are moving into charters. I think post-pandemic, folks are looking at like, hey, we've disrupted how education's been delivered all these years, right? We used to say education happens at a place and a time. It's at this site from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Now we say education's anywhere, right? You just access the internet. It could be anywhere. So I think people are choosing that. Also, charter schools, for the most part, despite what you hear from some of the news articles, charter schools actually are performing well. Okay. Okay, next one. So what are some challenges on the horizon? Here's just a few of these. Some political challenges. There is increasing regulatory oversight, et cetera. Your economic challenges, decreased overall enrollment in California, uncertainty of some educational programs, uncertainty of fiscal policy, reputational challenges. We do have some charter schools that very, very few, but when they explode, it does have a ripple effect. And then we get regulations on everybody else. So then there's also internal historical issues that may have happened in different charter schools. Operational challenges, overcoming that reputation, then operational challenges, keeping up with increasing compliance demands, finding qualified staff, facilities, you guys all know, facilities, right? Staff turnover and ensuring consistency in operations. And then, of course, there's also always the educational challenges is that the accountability system. Now, I know that OPA performs really well as a whole, as a body. But there may be also gaps within your student population that you want to look at, right? There's also increasing number of students on IEPs and 504s. So there is more and more students who are qualifying for those. So how are you servicing those students? And then maintaining educational integrity of charter's unique instructional model. You will always have the traditional system pressing in on you to make you like them. So you have to push back out to make the traditional system more like you, right? But you have to be good in order to make it feel like you. So this is the constant kind of internal, external pressure that you're going to be working through over the next few years. And Catlin has years of experience. She's been in the legislature. She's one of your roles at CSDC is on the political legislative side.
Yeah, I help with some of the advocacy stuff.
Yeah, advocacy stuff. So Catlin has great experience. And I should have said, she also, she's here with CSDC, the Charter Schools Development Center, of which you are all members, and provides great resources. I don't think you all have access to those resources, so we'll kind of work on making sure that you have access to logging in and how you can get those resources.
They do now. I think they have it now from the,
Oh, okay.
because you all did a self-assessment.
Yeah.
So now you all have access.
Okay, terrific. All right. So just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions around that, Catlin is like most up to date on all of this stuff. Okay, so here's my closing in the next 3 minutes. This is one of my favorite quotes. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. So your job as a board member is not about how you manage the school today. Is how your students will be learning in the next 3 years to 5 years, and how the school will meet those needs in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years from now. I used to tell my teachers that if your students can Google the answer, then you're not asking the right question.
That's great.
Right?
It's a good one.
Right. But now there's AI. Right? So now what? Right? Because they can just ask the question. They can ask the question. The teacher doesn't even need to ask the question anymore. So you have to think about where your kids are, where they're going to be. You think about where you were if you have elementary students, where you were when you were in 5th grade and what you had when you were in 5th grade, and look at your own kids and where are they going to be when they're your age? What's going to be happening there? So on that eye for tomorrow. All right, so if you look at, I'm a visual learner, so if you look at where 21st century schools used to be, this would be kind of visually representative of 21st century schools. Next. Next one. This is 21st century public schools. Next one. This is what charter schools did. Charter schools increased the number of options and choices, right? And then next one. But this is learning, right? So we need to get out of our buckets and actually focus on what learning is about. And then the next one. And then this actually represents learning in life. So if we think about where we're taking our kids, it's from those little buckets of paint to this canvas. Okay. So what's next for California charter schools? I don't remember what, so kind of think about, and then what's next for your school? All right, so that section, any thoughts? Reflections?
Thank you for the history
Yeah,
and
so
to
true.
contextualize everything
Okay,
for us.
very good. Okay, you guys are all ready out there to change the education system now? All right, very cool. Okay,
Can I
Yes.
also put an exclamation point on the part of, I think we don't often wear the hat like intentionally a reformer.
yes.
And so this is like, yeah, re-spark that in my mind of considering that as we enter the different decisions that we make.
Yes, very good. Thank you, thank you.
And also, this is very good at refocusing the idea on getting out of the weeds.
Yes, yes. Perfect. Good. Very good. All right. I think our next slide is.
We have a 5-minute break though, if you wanna,
We have a 5-minute break for you to stretch and reflect.
get some
and
coffee,
think.
delicious treats over there,
Yeah.
they look good.
We're on time. I know I rushed through that really quickly.
That was really great.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate
Sanders. Yes, I do too. Actually, I have a hard time.
So I have the lab, one of the green things, and actually I was reading it, it was like, and it says, doesn't always finish their sentences. So it says to me all the time. I'll be saying something, and then and he's like, you didn't finish your sentence. And I'm like, well, I mean, I did, maybe in my head, but I mean, like, what did you need? A lot. And then when I read that, I was like, oh.
Good pleasure. Oh, she was so. She felt like so lucky. Was that
Yeah,
you?
that was still.
Whereas the other teachers in my grade level play together. She plays back. She does. Okay, it's not a bad thing. Okay, and they put a lot of stuff. She's great. Okay, but. It's not just. Oh, and this is. It's not a problem. Okay, that's not.
I think they.
I didn't use it.
Battery, but the.
Yeah.
Tells
Yeah,
us
yeah, I got that.
a little bit more detail.
Oh, yes, I got her. I didn't think. And so I just like, okay, I'm like, oh, we don't. That's good, all right. She's a good teacher too. He was so excited yesterday though. He like, she's a nice classroom as well. Oh, she does, she does. It was so funny. He was so excited. He like ran, he's like, I'm going to my sister's school. It was the cutest thing ever. So it was, yeah, it was super fun. So what good way to end it. Do I get to keep this?
Yes, absolutely, you get to keep it, yes. And actually, I have something that gives you a little bit more detail about your particular.
I've done these many times, so. These are in here. So my red and yellow.
The front tells you the front part.
My red used to be a lot brighter and now my yellow is, yeah, so I go more, I lean towards yellow as I've gotten older.
Nice evolution.
Yeah, and it makes sense because in just like, your natural progression in a career, it's.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
But.
Yeah, mine is.
So mine is orange and green. Mine is orange and green. And then you just see this orange, yellow, orange, green, like. Mine is yellow.
I really like your slide on the challenge on the horizon.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of EdSource. I love that you guys put that article up.
Yeah,
They're great.
yeah.
Yeah, I've read them for years now. I find their articles really interesting.
They're good. I think they're more balanced. At
Yeah.
one point, I
Yeah.
thought they were
Yeah.
really biased against charter.
Yeah, no, I think they're better now.
Yeah, they are better.
Well, that one that just came out about what's going on in LA. how there's like that fight off space right now.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it makes you kind of, it's just kind of, I like it too, because it puts things in perspective of like what is actually happening in the landscape versus just,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
what I
what's
mean?
happening in your little
Yeah,
silo. Yeah.
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
sure.
So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, oh, good. All right. Oh, no, this actually, yeah, I just got.
I was a little bit ahead. I hope you were going to.
No, I mean, it was fast, but it wasn't too fast.
Okay.
It was fast, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep.
It'll be another minute or two and I'll bring it up.
It's, I know you have like processing time, that's how like you go through all this. And
Yeah.
If anybody on the customer.
I always like to have somebody else do this area.
Just
Yeah,
wait, just
they're
be
patient.
patient.
Thinking about. this.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I really like this, yeah, the little, it was fun, just fun little.
It's just like a little fun thing.
Yeah.
I had like, I had a big green one that I just got stuck in my, or yellow one rather, that I have on my desk. Now everybody's getting into the snacks. Yeah.
They need a snack break.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
But all of it.
Yeah, Sharpie breathe there.
Improvements. It's good.
I'm turning right now, so I'm.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I'm gonna introduce myself. Yeah, good.
I just don't know that.
Yeah, I don't really know these.
Yeah, I just fascinated. How was your meet with professor yesterday? It was really hot. It was super hot. You guys went too, huh?
Kids, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you kept your right.
They, the middle school stuff was really well received.
The middle school one?
It's actually kind of nice to have that big car, because usually I have like a little tiny, I'm like, I don't know, am I close to, you know?
Yeah, she did play
Yeah.
that was Maggie's baby. That was such a good improvement.
Yeah.
Um,
She loved it. She was like,
Okay.
oh, I gotta go at 8 in the morning, and then she was awake at 6 and like already super excited once it actually came. So.
what do you mean?
If they get kids, so if they can't be part of it.
Web?
Contrary to the whole point.
Yeah.
Being inclusive. How did that happen? No, because it's a great program though. It's such a great program. It's literally against the name.
Yeah. Fully,
That's good.
fully against them. Web is where everyone belongs. So it's like. We are, yeah.
How do you not get in the class where everyone belongs? But I love the whole concept about it for sixth graders because it's like middle school's like a scary place. And so to me, the fact that they summoned it
really
early
doesn't-
No,
and
understood.
just
It's
like-
like-
just
it's
like
like-
middle school and be excited about it. And then you have your eighth.
And you have the big kids.
Yeah.
'Cause they're gonna be big, like.
Yeah.
a lot bigger.
Yeah, and they're good role models, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it is such a great program. And my oldest was one of the leaders last year, and then my third was just paid last year.
Yeah.
And so. it was
I
really
think they
neat
might
to
have
see.
seen you yesterday, Mira and.
Oh, I'm sure they
Way
did.
across the way.
I'm sure they did. My daughter and I were running around here like crazy, because it's like you only have so much time and you gotta get to all 8 teachers.
Yeah.
So. I think that's always the hard part, because the
Yeah.
elementary school is easy.
Yeah,
It's
you
not
go-
that, yeah.
Did they pause the stream?
Oh, I don't know.
We all need to remember
yeah.
this.
Oh, that's important.
Oh, I thought they paused it. Thank you.
There's lots of questions about who the Eagle is.
She loves it. My daughter is single at the middle school. She helps us out. And she just loves it. It is hilarious. She loves it. It's like.
I'm just gonna be for lunchtime, make sure that we're, yeah.
Yes.
Break.
Yeah, for break. Yeah.
Okay,
You don't want strangers, you can't eat on that.
No.
To introduce myself, but before I do, I just want to tell you how lucky you are to get to work with Tank. And I'm serious. So she talks about starting a charter school at 28. She's actually an absolute pioneer in charter schooling. So there are 1,300 charter schools in California. What's your charter number?
19.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Pioneer in charter world. And so, yeah, you're really lucky to get to work with her. I've known Ting for a long time. She helped mentor me when I started the charter school that I started. So I'm Catlin O'Halloran Heller. I work for the Charter Schools Development Center, which you are all members of. Thank you for your membership. And we provide all sorts of training and technical expertise. One of the documents that I'm going to refer to later is you're the first school to see it. It's a lead administrator evaluation toolkit that we just, I don't have it with me because it's literally they were putting it on the website yesterday while I was on the plane, but we try to be really innovative in the things that we do and try to really meet charter schools where they are. A little bit of background about me. So first of all, on the name thing, I pronounce my name Catlin, which isn't obvious by the way that it's spelled. But my mom was a big fan of a poet named Dylan Thomas. And Dylan Thomas wrote, "Do not go gentle into that good night." Some people have heard that poem. And his wife's name was Catlin McNamara. And so she loved the name. She heard it on a recording. And there were no Caitlins when I was born, right? And so it was Catlin. I grew up in a small town. Nobody got my name wrong because I was the only one. And then I used to teach swim lessons when I was a teenager. And I had a little Caitlin in my class one time. And she's like, I was like, oh, like it was the foreshadowing of what was to come, right? And my name was never pronounced correctly again. So yeah. So anyway, I work with the Charter Schools Development Center. My background, just a little bit on my background. I am the founder of a charter school in Dixon, which is where I'm from, Dixon Montessori Charter School. We are going to celebrate 20 years. So in next month. I'm on the board there now again, but I've had giant breaks of board service. So I was a founding board member, and then I eventually went off of the charter school board, went on to the traditional board, but came back to the charter school board in that role as an authorizer. So I got to sit in an authorizer role, and then I left again. And then I came back just a couple of years ago to serve again. They had a vacancy and I thought I could be a good voice. So I came back to do that again. My background, my work background is most of my career I spent at the state capitol as a staff to legislators. In some of my area, one from San Diego, different places, mostly in education policy. So, and actually Ting and I worked at Department of Ed together for a little while at one point in time too. So just a little bit about my background. So today I'm going to talk to you mostly about how to be a really good charter school board. There are, sort of, we call it best practices, and there's things you're going to do that are ways that fit better with your school. But I'm going to throw some things out there, food for thought. At the end, we have a list of things that we're thinking, based on the information we've gathered from you and the information we're sharing with you that might be next steps for you in the evolution of your board. So first, we're going to start with just understanding charter school governing board roles and responsibilities. So next slide. Oh, no. Okay, here we are. Okay, no, sorry, back. I was looking at my, okay. So I tell folks most often, and I speak to boards, people who've been on a board for a really long time, people who are brand new, first day on the board. So I mean, the entire spectrum, and there are all sorts of opinions on what charter school boards should be doing. And these are really sort of the big four. So you are responsible for the oversight, ensuring fiscal accountability. We spend taxpayer dollars, and you need to be sure that when you get that budget, that looks balanced, right? That you have the information you need. You also have to ensure academic success because we're schools, right? That is job one, right? Academic success. And then this is one that often gets missed, but the way that charter school boards are designed, and they're in law, charter school boards are in law, there is no way to run a charter school without a board, without a governing board, is to create an umbrella under which the school will operate. And those are your board policies. So I will tell you on the board that I'm on now, like I came back on a couple of years ago, and I'm like, some of these policies are really out of date. And this is one of our big jobs. But it's something that I think gets lost in sort of where should we be involved and what should we be doing? But it's a big one. You set the umbrella, everything else follows under that. So one of the things that I have for you on the list for future is to look through your board policies, make sure you have a process for reviewing board policies and keeping those all up to date. And then, as I mentioned, we have a brand new toolkit for this, the evaluation of the school's lead administrator. So I often tell folks you have an employee of one, right? No matter how many people are in your school, you have an employee of one. And what you do is you set goals and you evaluate based on those goals. And you hold that administrator accountable for those goals and the things that you have decided are important. What you don't do is, and if at the end of the day, if the administrator is not performing, not meeting us, then you have to figure out what happens next. But what you don't do is manage all of the rest of the staff. That's not your job. It's just really holding the lead administrator accountable. So you're a employee of one. Okay, next slide. Check my notes here, make sure I got everything. Okay, so how do you fulfill these responsibilities? The first one is this really comprehensive year-round evaluation and feedback process for the school's lead administrator. And I have another little section I'm going to go into what we're offering now is in terms of a toolkit a little more deeply, but I will say that what we have found is that that it needs to be a year-round process. That you set goals starting at the beginning of the school year, maybe after the school scores have come back from last year, and you set goals as a governance team. And I have a slide we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But you 6 of you are the governance team. So you'll set some goals. The lead administrator will be tasked with carrying them out. As a board, then you'll follow up on things like making sure that you have the budget for that, right? Do you have enough money to do the things that you asked for to do? Do you have the policies in place so that you have a staff handbook that reflects your board policies, those sorts of things. So we'll talk a little more about that later, but the evaluation is a big job. Passing board policies. So again, the board policies, they provide the direction and the umbrella. We have sample policies on our website that you as members are free to use. They're a great place to start. Folks are using all sorts of different things, sometimes from their attorneys and all of that is good as well. I know you guys have YMC and Jerry was here speaking to you. Yeah, I know Jerry very well and yeah. And they do great work. But we also offer that. And then we created a year ago a checklist. So you can go through the checklist. It can be something that your school uses as a document to say, are we up to date on all of these things? When was the last time we looked at it? Was there a law change? Is there something we need to update? I often have schools, and thank goodness, at CFTC, we're a very small but mighty team. So there's only 11 of us. And so before I left last week, I had someone reach out to me and say, you guys talked about in one of your budget presentations a new law change. It's not reflected in your policy. It's just for some independent study schools. Are you going to update that? I'm like, on it, right? So we're updating the policy. So sometimes the things do slip between the cracks a little bit, but we have a great community and making sure that we get our things done. So that's the checklist is a great way to check on those things. And then, in terms of understanding your responsibilities, again, you're making sure that you're really taking a hard look at the budget. And your budget priorities should align with your LCAP, right? So you've set what your goals are, or your strategic plan. You've set what your goals are, you've said these are the things we're going to do. Make sure as a board you have the funding to back that up and that you have put that money in there for those programs and projects and priorities. And then make sure that board members have the training they need to understand the school's budget. This has become a real hot button issue in charter schools. And in fact, there's a bill pending in the legislature right now that would require you to have some fiscal training as a charter school board. And part of it is because we've seen that sometimes board members don't understand what it is that they're approving or not approving. And so, this is you have a fiduciary responsibility by law. So it's making sure you understand that. And don't be afraid to, ask for help. Or, I didn't come in with any sort of fiscal background. But we have on our website, we have videos, we have webinars, we have, I did a podcast for about a year or so, which I'm hoping I'm going to get back to at some point in time, but other priorities got shifted around. But anyway, and there's a great episode on the podcast that talks about fiscal board responsibility and that sort of thing. So easy ways to digest some of that information. The podcast is called Boarding Pass, and we're on Spotify and all those sorts of things. And then ensuring that your funding aligns with your LCAP priorities. So, you shouldn't be spending money on something that you haven't already set as a goal. And if you need to, or think you need to, go back and revise then that goal-based document. And And then you're gonna review the school's academic, hang on, sorry, I just didn't want to talk on the phone. Review the school's academic performance and make sure that the budget aligns accordingly. Okay, next slide.
Yep.
Oh, I was also gonna say, this is why I had needed my notes. On that last slide, I have a little asterisk by the passing board policies. So the board policy review was an area that received a lower rating on your self-assessment. So that's something that I wanted to make sure that when, that's why I put it on the list. So your self-assessment was the one that you did that came back with the green, looks like this, well, it's not all marked up like this, but it's the green, it came back from CSDC. And there were several areas where you as a board rated yourselves as needing improvement. And one of them was that you wanted to make sure that you had a process for reviewing your policies. So that's something I added to your to-do list after Ting and I are out of here. We're more than willing to help you with it, but we'll be gone. It won't happen today. Yeah. Okay. So for with governance versus management. So you, I said, like I said, the 6 of you are a governance team, but it's like playing on a baseball team, right? You all have different roles. Now your goal is to win the game, right? I mean, you want to win your team, you're going to work together to achieve that. But there's a pitcher and a catcher and and all those sorts of things, right? So you have different roles. And so when we look at what the role is of the board, the 5 of you, what's your role? You're focusing on governance and strategy, right? You're focusing on, do you have a strategic plan? Does your LCAP, look like what you want it to look like? Are you matching those budget priorities? You're gonna hire, trust, and empower a really high quality lead administrator. And we use this word lead administrator because, as Ting said, there's a whole bunch of different superintendent, chancellor and, executive director and all sorts of things. So, in this context, I mean, Kim and the executive director, that's your lead administrator. You're going to evaluate and provide feedback on that lead administrator. So again, you are saying, we trust you, back to the trust, right? We trust you to run our school for us. But we need to make sure that we are evaluating and providing you feedback and making sure there's no surprises. I just walked into the office of, I'm currently at Dixon Montessori, I'm the board president. So, when I go through the process, we'll have a little clearer understanding of this, but at the end of the process, we suggest you actually have a letter written that goes in the personnel file. And the letter, I never hand the letter to the executive director and have him read it. I tell him ahead of time, this is, foreshadowing, this is what you're going to read, this is what's going to be in there. So there's no surprises, but there were no surprises anyway, because we talk about this every 3 months. We talk about it. He gives us feedback. I'm not able to do this. I tried this. It didn't work. This was your suggestion, and we give him feedback. So it's a two-way conversation, and we adapt as a board, right? We say, as an example, I was telling Ting this morning. One of the things that came out of his evaluation was that he really tries to do a lot of things all at the same time. And so we said, we have set a space in the budget to hire you an executive assistant. You need help. You are drowning. We want you to get out of the weeds and we want you to get into the whole, sort of bigger picture thing. And so we talked about it. We talked about it 3 months ago. So when I walked in and said that to him, like, this is it, green light, let's go, right? Let's hire that. That was not a surprise to him. We've talked about this and he was completely on board. Yes, that would help me. So again, it's this two-way dialogue. And then, so what's your executive director's, the management portion? So you're the governance. What's the management portion? She's going to focus on the day-to-day activities. I worked once with a board who was really into, I don't know why, but they were really into the bell schedule, right? I'm like, not your job, not your job, right? Well, but these other schools and there's traffic, again, not your job. So day-to-day stuff belongs to the lead administrator. And the lead administrator also needs to update the board on the school's fiscal and academic progress. So you guys are not working in this office, right? What you can expect and what you should hope for at your meetings is a comprehensive report. And you should expect it ahead of time so you can review it. But you're not in the day-to-day micromanaging and seeing all of the things that go on. You get the progress reports at your board meetings. Same thing with academics, right? You're not administering the tests. You're not choosing all of the things that, that go on and how that happens. but you need progress reports on that, and you need them regularly. So that's the executive director's job, is to provide that for you. And then her job is to manage the rest of the school staff. So you guys, employee of one, Kim, employee of everybody else. And again, together, you're gonna build that governance team. See if I have anything else on this one. Yeah, so I'm making sure that in your sort of back to your policy making, making sure that your policies and procedures your policies are transparent, so that your management can create really clear procedures, and that there's a lot of transparency also in the group, and that Kim doesn't come in with a big surprise for you, and you guys don't offer big surprises for her. So next slide, please.
Can I ask a question?
You bet. And anytime you want to ask a question, this is a workshop, so I'm sorry, I should have said that ahead of time, but yes, please.
Just any like of your past observations on best practice or the thoughts around, sorry, let me set up a little context.
Yeah.
So I started on the board, I was not a parent of an OPA child, right?
Mhm.
And now I am. So I've kind of seen the difference, as a
Oh,
board member and
fine.
kind of
Sure,
my interest, right?
sure.
Most of our board are current parents, and we have one former, right? And so I can see that there's a fine line when you have interest as a parent,
Mhm.
versus our role as board members. So
Mhm.
just maybe a little bit of thoughts on that, especially when we talk about the management and
Sure.
when you talk about, oftentimes there might be interest of a board member on a particular topic, like
Uh-huh.
football schedule or
Uh-huh,
whatever it may
uh-huh.
be, and how to kind of negotiate that and be careful.
Sure, and
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so back to that, the slide where I showed those 4 priorities, right?
Mhm.
That's your job as a board member. Now, your job as a parent may be something else, right? Your job as a parent at home, or, as an advocate for your child at school, that's something else, but that doesn't come into this board room. Your job as a board are those 4 things. And so, and so sometimes you're right, it gets, because it's hard to separate ourselves as, but my child was in this class and, I didn't like the 3rd grade teacher, and, we should fire the 3rd grade teacher, right? And I'm on the board, so I have the authority to do that, right? So as a board, you only can act as a board. You cannot act as individuals. So while you might bring in your observations or your thoughts, and we did this, some of you have more thoughts and feelings and, that kind of stuff, right? Certainly that influences your decision making, but it's not your job as a board, to really bring that parent hat in, other than you probably know a little more about the school. And I notice now, so in my first iteration of being on the board, my son started at Dixon Montessori when he was 6 years old. And, he was right in there, and, teacher, and it was all the things, right? And we were only 38 kids when we first started. So, I mean, we knew everything about everything. And, now he's, he just graduated veterinary school from UC Davis. So he's a practicing veterinarian, and I don't have any other children. And that's my, my focus is completely different, right? I'm not at the school, in the classrooms all the time. And so, yes, so I think you have to be really careful when you come in this room and act as a board, or when you come in whatever room you have your own regular board meetings, to remember that you're a board member first, really, in this context, and a parent second. Yeah. Other questions and things that I've shared?
Yeah, and I could just add to that too. So we had a lot of parent representatives. In fact, our bylaws in my school said you had parent representatives from each of our 5 academies on there. And so when I would recruit parents to come onto our board, I would tell them, your perspective as a Performing and Fine Arts Academy parent is valued. However, your duty is to represent all of Natomas Charter School students.
That's right.
Because really, that's what your job is to ensure the protection of all the students. And so in order for you to do that, you also need to visit all the other sites. You also need to understand how all the programs work. So you get that wider perspective than what your own child's experience is.
Thank you for sharing that, because I like that. So your view as a parent is certainly valued, right? But it's not, it's your role as a board member is different.
Yeah.
And I will say that sometimes I've worked with boards where a particular board member got on the board to change
Yes.
a thing, right?
Yes.
A thing, whatever that thing was, right? And first of all, it's very disruptive. And second of all, it's very disappointing for them, because unless you get the rest of the board members on there with you, you have no individual power. that's really sort of a myth of being, a board member, I was talking at the in-service back to school for Dixon Montessori and I said something that kind of made people laugh, but I was saying, I was talking about improved communication and I said, I said, I know you guys talk about us as the board, right? And they all kind of laughed and I said, but we're all, individual human beings also. And so of course we bring some of that into our work, but yeah, as a whole, really, you're just the board. That's it. So. Other questions? Okay. Okay, so next slide, yeah. So we've talked about what makes a successful, understanding your roles and responsibilities. What can erode a strong governance team? So for board members, and remember again, we're going back to the baseball analogy, you're all members of a team, right? So if you're not prepared, if you haven't been practicing your, pitching and catching and all that sort of stuff, right? You're not prepared when you come in here, you're wasting everybody's time, right? Read your board packets, make sure you know what's in there, make sure you can have dialogue. I have a thing in here later where we're going to talk a little bit about some questions board members can ask. I'm working with a school, I was telling Ting about this too on Tuesday, and one of their issues is that their board members don't engage, right? Mm-hmm. And so the question for me is, have they all read their packets? If you don't have questions, if you've seen all of this stuff and you don't have any questions, are you prepared? And there's lots of other reasons why they might not be asking questions, but that's one of the things that came to mind for me. So make sure you're prepared. Another something that erodes a strong governance team is unethical practices. So making sure, we've seen a little bit of this in the news, boards rubber stamping things that are not ethical in terms of fiduciary duty, or making exceptions for people who want to come into school and you have a long lottery and the board's saying, but get this person in because, whatever reason, because I like them, because they could be great at fundraising, because whatever, not ethical. Micromanaging the school's lead administrator. We see this one a lot. This is pretty common. And I have another slide we'll talk about it a little bit more, but really making sure that you aren't in the weeds, that you are on that umbrella level of governance and that you're not in that day-to-day sort of stuff. And then stepping outside the role of governance, which is what you just talked about in terms of being a parent. And sometimes people step outside that role and say, I only want to be on the board because I want to change this thing. That's not really your job as a board, to have sort of a single issue. Yeah.
Could I also add to that on kind of that being prepared piece of it? I guess the other piece is the relational piece around being on a board. So there's often times that based on personality, and we just saw some of the personality, or some of the color personalities where the personality likes to avoid conflict. So it might prevent that person from speaking up if they don't agree necessarily, whereas there's some color personalities that are more dominant and they'll speak their mind right away. Yellow is one of them, I will admit it, I will speak my mind, right? And so that sometimes can be overbearing for some of those who need a little bit more time to think about it or need a little bit more time. And so that's where it's really important. And again, you're not any one individual is the board. You are all together as a board. So that means that those of you who may be more introverted or those of you who don't avoid conflict may not want to speak up, but that is actually part of your job, is that you have to speak up, you have to stand up and say something. And the role of the chair, and I think Catlin may go beyond, the role of the chair is to make sure that all voices are heard. Mm-hmm. So that's the chair is kind of a referee in some ways too, to make sure that everybody has that opportunity. And yellow's being very balanced. I'm really good at doing that, yes. Right? Being able to hear. And so if you're not hearing from my board members, say, so what are your thoughts about this? Mm-hmm. What do you think? Right? So that you don't have only the dominant voices come in.
Yeah, absolutely. We will talk about that a little bit more in this presentation too, but yeah, the role of the board chair is to make sure that all the voices are heard, because all of you are here because you're contributing something to this, right? And all of the voices should be heard in this. That's really important. And you bring different backgrounds and experiences, which just make it better in terms of a team, right? Better strengths in terms of a team. So,
well, I was just gonna say, I think a challenge for us, at least myself, I can speak for myself, for number 4 is that, being a board member, you you receive a lot of feedback
Sure.
from the ground that maybe Kim doesn't get, because
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't necessarily get to see as many parents as we might see in a given, day of drop off or pickup
Mhm,
or whatever. So, I mean, that's a tough needle to thread, I guess.
So when you say that, are you talking about, so you're getting maybe somebody saying, I don't like the bell schedule, right?
Yeah, sure,
Right.
to use that example, yeah,
Right.
for sure.
And so do you have a process then for providing that feedback to Kim? Does your board have sort of a common process for providing that feedback?
We just share.
We just share, but I guess part of the challenge is, you send it as an email, does it seem like a directive, or does it
That's right.
seem like
That's
just feedback? Is it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. And maybe it is in, I'm just thinking about it as you're saying that, maybe it is in the way that you phrase it, because I get it, how it could seem like a directive, but what if it is just feedback, right? Hey, I was just there, I am your eyes and ears out in the community, I've heard these things, and again, I'm not telling you how to do them, I'm just telling you that this is information you might like to have.
Awareness.
And yeah, awareness, and
Mhm.
exactly, maybe there's a better way to sort of work on some of that, so, yeah, absolutely, really good point. Okay, so so what erodes a strong governance team in terms of management, right? So this is my boss, Eric Premack, this is one of his old school phrases, dictator director. But you know what that kind of person is, you worked with that person or worked for that person, right? And somebody who says, it shall be done this way. And again, you're part of a team. And so it's hard to have somebody who is just like, nope, my way or the highway. I worked for the school when I first came on to CSDC. And I was kind of horrified. And she said, no, my board will not do that. My board will not. And I'm like, whoa, I talk to your board. And it turns out, that there are some places where the board is really just a rubber stamp for the lead administrator. And the sort of lead administrator is the dictator director of the school. And that's really bad for, there needs to be a check and balance. There needs to be sort of more communication than that. Again, the unethical practices and fraudulent practices, sort of goes without saying, but, if you have a lead administrator who's, doing funny stuff with the budget or approving things or, buying things that didn't get approved and those sorts of things, that's obviously erodes the governance team. Bad communication with school staff or the board. So again, as Ting pointed out, we all have different ways of communicating, but making sure that the communication is really open and that you're really having the dialogue around things, not waiting until the last minute to, flag an issue and just sort of so that you can work on it as a team together. But making sure you have that trust to have that communication. Can Kim come to you and say, I have this vulnerability. There is this thing that I have discovered or learned or what, and will you partner with her on that? Or does she feel like, oh no, my head's on the chopping block if I tell them that there's something, that's less than optimum. So making sure you have that communication. And then not providing enough information for board members to make a decision. So if I'm telling you to read your agenda packet and be prepared for meetings, you have to have the information to make those decisions. So questions about this and the erosion of trust, erosion of a governance team? Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about a board getting too involved that involves me. And I'm going to tell you the story. It's going to sound like I'm talking about something very personal about our former superintendent. But I want you to know that in the Sacramento Bee, you can look it up. He wrote an op-ed on this. So I do not feel as though I'm sharing any personnel issues. So when I was on the board with the Dixon Unified School District, so this is not a charter school board, but I'm on a traditional board. Our superintendent came into his cabinet meeting one day and said, I am having a mental health crisis and I am leaving. I do not know when I will be back. I do not know what you will do while I'm gone, but mic drop, right? I'm going to get some treatment. Thank goodness. It was a terrible mental health crisis, right? So he'd been the superintendent, he'd been with the district for 20 some odd years. I think he'd been the superintendent for 15 years or something at that point in time. Long time employee, beloved member of our community. And started with, and that's exactly what happened. He walks out, right? And here is his cabinet, stunned, right? What do we do? Starts with them not knowing because there hadn't been it did uncover lots of things that the district then did differently later, but that there was not enough information for the cabinet around how to manage the board and communication with the board. So they didn't believe they could tell us that the superintendent had at least temporarily walked off the job because they thought that they might violate the Brown Act. That was just something they were not clear about. So I heard about it about 2 hours later when it got leaked, and one of my cousins who's a teacher texted me, does that actually happen? And I'm like, not as far as I know. I was board president at the time. So I called the assistant soup and was like, what? And he's like, I didn't think we could tell. I thought we had to schedule a meeting. We were gonna try to schedule a meeting and tell you all in person. And I'm like, no, this is like red alert, emergency, right? So, what happened then was another board member and I got super involved. I mean, I was just panicked, right? I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have a superintendent. We clearly don't have a cabinet that feels like they're, I'm gonna step in and be in charge. And this other, we're gonna try to just get this ship righted again until he comes back or we hire someone new or whatever. And for a while that worked, right? Because they needed help. And I was, a small community and I'm very active in our community. And then it started doing all of the bad things, right? So it started, I had a full-time job. I didn't have time to run a school district, right? And these people who were in these roles were looking to me, but again, I'm really a volunteer supervising professionals at this point in time, right? I mean, technically, that my degree is not in education. We ended up, and my next slide is sort of how to move out of that. And we ended up moving out of it. But I will say that, my reaction was to jump in with both feet, and I still stand by that initial reaction. It is hard then to get out, right? Because you're trying to lay the groundwork as you get out. So what happens when things like this, and it happens to lots of schools, those sorts of things happen to lots of schools, which is why we highly recommend succession planning if you haven't already done that. So the board can lose focus on strategy and begin to micromanage tasks, which I'm guilty of doing, at least in the beginning. Charter school leaders can miss opportunities to fail or innovate because they're distracted by board interference. So if a board is getting too involved and it's just in the sort of the day-to-day stuff, or they have been an erosion of trust and they don't trust their leader anymore, and the board is constantly at them all the time with do this and do this and do this and do this, then they lose that opportunity to innovate and to run the school because they're always trying to answer board demands. Other key staff members can get confused and frustrated because there's no clear leadership structure. This happened at Dixon Unified. So that there wasn't a clear leadership. Who's in charge? The guy who's in charge is no longer here. We don't know when he's coming back. Is it the assistant soup? Is it Catlin who's the board president? Who do I answer to? And all the things that go with that. So that's, and the longer that goes on, the longer that becomes a problem. And then increased burnout from both staff and staff members and board members. There was no way I could sustain that, even if I wanted to, which I didn't want to, but there was no way for me to sustain that. I had a child at home and a full-time job and, all those sorts of things. So, anyway, so those are some sort of just things to think about in terms of that, and how hard it is then to get the reins back. So we're going to talk about that in the next slide. But any questions on this before we move to the next? Yeah,
I have a question, and I'm trying to think of the right words for it.
Sure.
How does the board address, how does the staff know the proper channels to go? In your example, what should staff have done? Or how is there a policy or a process? How do they know what they should do to ensure that that the board gets the right information if necessary? Because I do think in your exact example, I think there should always be these kind of processes, things in place to ensure that there's never questions or challenges.
Yeah, and so you nailed it, right? There should be processes in place, and that was the thing that Dixon Unified reflected on, right? Which was there'd been lots of talk about putting, and then we had board policies, we had sort of regular, but within the structure there was no real. So what happens if, right? There was no succession planning. There was no communications director. So also this immediately, like I said, 2 hours later, I had a text from a teacher. So this immediately spread like wildfire. and no communications person. So who's gonna address there's going to be a reporter call on this. I mean, this is going to happen, right? What happened to your longtime superintendent? Who's gonna answer that call? And so sort of having those processes in place ahead of time. And in terms of things like if it's not something of this magnitude, but maybe something where there's a concern about fiscal impropriety and those sorts of things. Again, there should be processes in place where, you know, the CBO discovers something and says to Kim, you know, I have this concern, and then I'm making this up, but Kim says, you know, oh, no worries, right? And there should be a process in which then, if the person really feels they have a valid concern, they go around that. Probably what happens though is Kim comes to the board and says, hey, you should know that CBO has discovered this, we're concerned about it, we're looking into it, there's this, you know, remedy for it, and we're gonna work through those things. But you need to have this process in place.
And there is like used to be called part of the uniform complaints procedure, where you're outlining what are the steps. So if a teacher has a complaint about a principal, let's say, then there's a procedure for that, and then whoever the principal's supervisor then goes in and does the investigation and the results. And then it goes up the chain. So if there is a complaint, what we had was if there's a complaint against me, then the board formed a committee, a subcommittee that looked into and investigated the situation and then reported back. But also want to make sure that there is good communication between the board and the executive director. So if something kind of moves up the chain, because I would actually be the parent could complain about a teacher. And then, but I did not get involved in that. Of course. You have to let the principal kind of deal with that. And then the parent complained about the principal. And so then, you know, it would kind of go up the chain, and then the parent complained about me. So then that's when the board would get involved. So you have to have those procedures laid out, and that's part of the what Alan was saying about the policies. Having your policies in place and reviewing it and making sure it's up to date. On that. So yeah, it's difficult to it's a double-edged sword because similar to the situation, I was involved in a startup of another charter school where I sat on the board of a startup charter school, and we were experienced charter school people. At the same time, we made some mistakes, and we had also a principal who had to be let go very, very suddenly. We had no succession planning. And, you know, mine being an educator, I'm like, okay, I'll step in. So I go into the district office or I go into the main office, you know, and I'm like principal for the day. And I start stepping into my, you know, it's like wearing old blue jeans. I'm like really comfortable and everything. The staff freaked out. And I'm thinking, wait a minute.
Right, I'm saving the day,
I'm saving the day. And they freaked out. It's like, why is a board member? What's going on with that?
Right.
You know, and they don't, because they're respecting the chain of command, if you will. It's like, wait a minute, we've lost the person, our executive person, and all of a sudden this board member is here. What does that mean? So you wield some power, not as individuals, but you do or have this kind of, there's a perception out there about the power, right? You will. And so you have to be very careful with that, because sometimes a parent will get your ear and they're like, oh, I got a board member on my side too. So you have to balance that, that thing. And again, it goes back to communication with your executive director, with your management.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, as you say, so the policies and the procedures and stuff, I mean, really having those in place. I mean, I think in Dixon Unified's case, that would have been, you know, if you could have just been like, okay, page 33, okay, this is what we do when, you know, something crisis happens, right? And it just wasn't there like that. It just didn't exist. Yeah. So, yeah, other questions? Okay, next slide. Okay, so how do we then, something like this happens, and again, super common on big scale like mine or small scale, you know, like some of the things that Ting was talking about, and or even smaller scale than that, but how do we return and focus as a board on our responsibilities? So first of all, you really need to just acknowledge the need for realignment. Hey, the crisis has passed, right? Ting is no longer in there being the, you know, the principal for the day. Alan is no longer trying to be a school superintendent, thank goodness. And so let's now everybody take a deep breath. Okay, we've got the systems back in place. You know, the assistant chief has stepped up. He's doing his job. We've got a communications person answering the press calls. Okay, deep breath. Let's figure out how we realign. And then I would suggest that you really sort of conduct a self-assessment. One of the things we learned at Dixon Unified was there were missing pieces. And so, okay, those aren't gonna happen tomorrow. We're not gonna get this done, right now, but let's add that to our list of things that we need to repair. The thing that did have to happen right away was getting a spokesperson, identifying one voice, right? So that was part of that self-assessment, informal sort of self-assessment. And then I would say really going deeper and doing exactly what you all are doing today, right? Which is engaging in a training or a retreat or a workshop and talking about system improvements. And do we have the policies in place? What if somebody does exactly what Ting says, only it's complaining against Kim, they've gone all, they started with the teacher they're mad at, and now they're mad at Kim, right? How does the board handle that? Do we handle it as a group? Is that a subcommittee? How do we manage that? And those are the things you develop in workshops like today. That's why you're spending your entire Saturday with all of us, right? And then refocus on those 4 really important governance priorities and functions, making sure that you're not letting the micromanagement stuff get in the way of the big picture, because no one else is doing that job. That's only you 5 can do that job. So making sure you refocus on that. Talking about that, defining and honoring the difference between governance and management that we talked about before. And then this one, and this is on your list of sort of to-dos, I think today, maybe it's on our list of to-dos for future, but but working on board goals. So what are your goals as a board? What do you want to do? What systems do you want to improve? How do you want to grow? How do you want to better support the school? See if I have any notes on that. And then we'll move to the next slide. Let's see. It's just important to take deliberate steps to refocus and realign. And it really has to be intentional. We want to do this and we're going to devote some time to doing that. So next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit to a little more interactive stuff. And this is sort of as a reminder. So you all read the pre-work, the article. And so I'm going to just sort of refresh your memory a little bit about this, because now we're going to roll up our sleeves and get into it a little bit. So there are 4 modes of engagement. There's a million things. I actually, you're going to use this who decides list. And if you look at it, when I wrote this a while back, and when I actually printed it, I'm like, there are 8 pages. That's a lot of things, but you have to make decisions on what's my role in this. So what is your mode of engagement? And none of these are wrong. They're just situational. What's your mode of engagement? Passive again is minimal involvement. Management really takes the lead. And in some of that, and again, the person I was talking about before early in my time with CSDC, risks includes underinformed governance, right? If you have a dictator director, if you have somebody who's really, and the board is really passive, it might mean that the board doesn't even know what's going on, right? They're just rubber stamping things. So that's something to just weigh. A mentor role is that the board advises early, offers guidance, but refrains from decision making, supports the development, right? Those are things that you can do sort of in a mentoring role as a board. As a partner role, the board really collaborates with management, makes some co-decisions, monitors implementation. But again, this can slow down the process a little bit. Are there times when you need to make a quicker decision? And then control. The board takes direct charge of decisions, ensures accountability, but can stifle innovation. And that's one of the things we see, is if the board's too controlling, the innovation are the executives being motivated? Are they motivated? Or are you taking that away from them? Next slide, one more, part 2 of our pre-work here. So some of the stuff that I thought was really interesting from that article is that a lot of boards are passive. A lot of boards are really passive. And in fact, 46% stayed passive. It was interesting to me too that these were somewhat balanced and I'm wondering, just sort of a wondering out there is, could you have all 4 of those be a little more balanced, right? Mm-hmm. Could you sometimes partner more? Could you sometimes mentor more? As opposed to staying passive, as opposed to just so heavy in one category. And again, you really do have to have a dynamic approach. When you look at this, you have to really be thoughtful about how you're going to make decisions and what way you're going to engage. And then one of the benefits of using these modes is your agility. So you can adjust, right? Well, let's use a different mode on this one than we used on the last one. Okay, so what we're going to do now is you're gonna take in your folder, you have a couple of things. And then I'm gonna sort of throw in one more wild card, but you're gonna have this, who decides, you're gonna need this for this exercise. And then you're gonna need, yeah, that one.
This way too. Because this here will provide you with, some summary of each of those modes in there, which will be helpful as you're looking at it. And if I could say too, one of the reasons we thought it was really important for you all to have this time to have discussions around these 4 examples that Catherine's gonna lead you through is because as I had my individual conversations with each of you, you all have not decided which mode you want to be in for certain things. So you have to decide as a board, not any one individual, decide we should be in control mode for this. You have to all agree as a board which of these modes you want to be in for different situations.
And the other thing I'm gonna, exactly right, and the other thing I'm gonna overlay, and this is a little, I didn't print this, but you guys, you probably, well, you could refer to maybe on your computer, but your own, I printed this off your website. So what do you actually say the duties are? And that sometimes helps with the modes, for instance, I mean, at least, and again, this is, you can be agile and you can change this if you wanted to. But for instance, your actual duties as board of directors say things like promote and guide, receive. It says ratify. So there are ways in which you're in a more passive mode. And then it says things like develop or hire. And and then there's ones like participate, right? So those are all different modes of interacting. And so you may want to take a look at that as well as you're reviewing it. But what we're going to do now in terms of an exercise is we're going to do the same thing again, the 3 and the 3, if that works for folks. And I'm going to give you we're going to do probably 3 of these. So I'm going to give you or turn you to an example, and you're going to read what the sort of common practices are. This is what this little handout has, sort of the common practices, sort of generally best practices around decision making. But what I want you to do is to evaluate whether or not you're doing that, and what mode you're doing it in now, and whether you should shift. So you're looking at these and you're saying, oh, I have options, right? Should we shift? So the first one I'm going to give you is on page 6 of this larger handout. Under topics, it's the second from the top, and it's fiscal stewardship and oversight. So what's the role for your executive director in fiscal stewardship and oversight? And what's the role for the board? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about this, and we're going to kind of turn back and share so that you're all sharing with each other on what your thoughts are and what you all decide. But for right now, we're going to pair up in groups of 3 and talk about it.
Are you talking about, and you're talking about all?
No, just the one two from the, on section. So it's just, I'm just giving you a micro thing just a little thing to work on, because the whole thing is a lot, right? So I'm going to give you a couple little things. One of them is, if the topic is fiscal stewardship and oversight, we've given you some suggestions of what we think best practices are. It's not on, so fiscal stewardship and oversight. It's on page,
Sorry, what page?
it's on mine, it's on page 6, maybe it's not on your name. I see it, okay, page 6.
Okay, yeah, no, you're right.
Okay, and and so you're gonna look at what our best practices are, and then you're gonna talk about specifics. Okay.
I think there's something literally about this.
That's fine, yeah, just something I hear.
Page 6, second one.
I'd love to do bigger, just in the, at time, I'm gonna pick out tiny ones and say, what mode do you do when you're engaged in this activity?
So it's one of these modes.
One of those modes,
Okay.
right? And the
Based on
mode that
this.
you do now might not be, you might reflect and say, oh, that's not actually what we should be doing, right? Maybe we should be doing something else. But what mode are you doing and what mode should you be doing?
Is there anything in here about what the default mode typically is for each one of these or no? Because I think there was in one of the pre-work things that I
Okay,
read.
oh, the default mode?
Yeah.
I think it's in the article.
It's in the article.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to kind of know like what generally,
So
at
this
least for
is-
me, because I'm new.
So, and maybe it's helpful for me. So in the fiscal stewardship and oversight, CSDC suggests that sort of best practices, common practices are that the school's executive director ensures that all school expenses are in line with board approved budget and in accordance with the board approved policies. That's sort of the general, right? And then the governing board provides financial oversight and ensures adequate funding for proposed budget. So I would say that's sort of a mentor mode. That's how I sort of see that, right? Is more than passive, certainly less than control, maybe some back and forth in communication. But I think there are other options in other circumstances. So what does that look like for you guys? Other questions?
Good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, can you clarify that as
What?
well? That-
Would you go back one slide? So the mentor, so the partner is really more of a collaboration. And I would say that the mentor is, I don't think, do you have thoughts on this? The mentor is more, the board sort of.
Yeah, so the board, basically, the mentor mode is, hey, yeah, you're asking for my advice, but the lead administrator is already pretty much doing. But yeah, I'll take some feedback from the board. Whereas partner is that, let's get together and discuss this and mutually decide on something together. So that's the difference. Now, with partnering, that takes more of a process. That means that if you're really partnering, you have to have equal say, and therefore that means more meetings to get to that point, right? So you gotta kind of look at your investment in time versus kind of what the ultimate decision needs to be. And then mentoring is more like, okay, you're bringing it to us, we can give you feedback. Passive is like, sure, go ahead. Yeah, let's do it. Control is that you are doing everything. And just so you know that if you're in control mode, that means you gotta commit the time. You gotta commit the time to know all the details. And you gotta take accountability for it, because if you're making the decision for it, you can't blame the executive director. If it's the board's decision, the board's gonna carry it out. You can't just say, hey, I'm making a decision, and then all of a sudden become passive when it comes to implementation of it. You can't just say, hey, we've decided we're gonna do this, but you go take care of it. Because then it's like, okay, I didn't make this decision, but now, I'm gonna carry it. And there's all these things that I didn't think about, So you have to think of all the different consequences when you're choosing that piece and where you think you should be. And again, there's no right or wrong.
Right.
It sounds like mostly this and maybe 20% this. 80-20, but it's also.
So I don't shoot. I don't know what we did. I just shoot it once. As I saw that.
As treasurer, I can.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Input.
I feel like you guys,
Such,
you know,
so I think
like present.
there's.
Yes, yes, it
Some
definitely.
questions, but overall.
Not getting on the nitty-gritty.
Yes, that's what we're-
Yeah, I would say we've been partnering because CBA
I
is
do
doing.
think so, did
So I see, especially with Kevin also, is that we formally in the sense of kind of, there's been,
They make
on all
those items,
so in order to ensure.
Yeah,
that- and when we talk about like where the partnership is really, important, but, yeah, I mean, to me, I don't think we're passive at all. I don't think we're ever passive. You're never passive. No. Nor should we. Nor should we. We can just punch that one off on here. I wouldn't want it that way either.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking of going by that kind of board.
I'm gonna start with this side. What did you guys say? Where are you now and where do you want to be?
I think I was learning.
Okay,
So we
great.
learned that we are partnering a lot, we mentor some, we're almost never passive. And I would love to balance that a little bit more. But it sounds like there are needs for this organization that have required us to be where we are, and hopefully we will balance more.
You're going back to that refocusing and,
Yes.
you know, acknowledging and so, and in the terms of the fiscal, where did you guys land? Where
I
do you?
think they should speak to that, because
Okay.
I'm not as good at articulating that part of it.
I think that we've gone really back and forth between partnering and mentoring.
Okay.
Because this was Kim's first full year.
Mhm.
And so there was
Makes
things
sense.
that we needed to kind of make sure that we walked hand in hand with her
Mhm.
versus things that we needed to mentor on.
Okay.
And so, and I think one of the examples that we talked about specifically was around the board like the board budget.
Mhm.
And kind of the budget for OPA is that like one thing that was really good is that there was a really good, clear defined set of assumptions
Mhm.
that we kind of all aligned on, like this is the assumptions we want to really make sure, like how's our enrollment and things like that, that really kind of set the standard.
Sure, yeah.
And then Kim and her team went off and did the work and then brought it back to the board.
Okay.
And so it was a really good example where there was some partnership on kind of what we needed from the get-go.
Goal setting.
Yes, and then there was some mentorship to say, okay, we're on track, we're not on track,
Mhm.
and then going back to really approving the budget through a partnership.
Great, great. And do you guys hearing that, what thoughts do you have? Did yours sound like that? Did it sound different from that?
We're very the same.
It's the same. Okay, look at that. Even when we separate you're, you know, together as a team. That's great. So it sounds like in some of the things we were talking a little bit about, the policies and procedures, sounds like, and again, this is on your to-do list, but you know, what are the procedures for reviewing contracts? You know, these are things like this that maybe if those were in place, it wouldn't feel so squishy, right? Like, oh, must be the board's job because nobody else is doing it, right? What are those? And, you know, is it your attorney who reviews them? Is it somebody on staff who reviews them? Those sorts of things. So, well, good. So we're gonna do one more before we're gonna actually break for lunch a little, our lunch is 11:45. So I'm gonna try to squeeze in one more of these and you guys are gonna switch topics. Let's see which one I'm in. I had 4 of them originally, but I love this topic. This wheel. Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna just try to find one that, I'm gonna try to find one that's a good one. Okay, how about, on page 4, we have student testing, so totally different topic. Page 4 is third one down there, student testing. You know, CSDC says that the league administrator is responsible for administering student testing and collecting data. And the governing board, as a best practice, uses the collected data to review the academic program and student outcomes at the school. Regularly receives and reviews a comprehensive range of student assessments and growth data, for alignment with goals in the study charter, LCAP, and relative to charter renewal standards. So what then is the role of the board in student testing, knowing sort of what you're supposed to be doing? And so let's talk about that again back in your.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Yeah, it's clear cut to me.
Yeah.
We rely on.
There's no way we're passive, but we're not. We're completely beyond that.
I think this is honestly, yeah, so I think,
We don't get into the weeds of it at all.
This is really structured in our board stuff.
But I don't feel like we need
So
to.
we're pretty standardized. I mean,
That's why you agree, there's negatives there that.
Yeah, so it's nice about it.
There's always certain.
Yeah. And we have, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of it.
exactly. So, I think the only way where we sometimes mentor is, one of the things that we've looked at is what we set ourselves against. So one thing that used to be is we would compare ourselves against like, what are the school districts surrounding us looking at? So how are we doing versus the other school districts, like public school districts? And then one of the things that we've kind of started
Okay, yeah, so you guys start and tell us what you came up with on
And that's
this.
honestly.
This time. What did you come up with on this one?
Quite easily, we picked mentor.
Okay.
And even dabble in passive at times, but not the negative parts of the passive, but just allowing them to do what they need to do and trusting our assessments are in the right place, and then we get the information we need from them.
Fantastic, great. And what do you guys think? Or do you agree with that assessment? Do you have other thoughts about how it's done?
I think we agreed on mentor, and the only other thing I added is that, we've been starting to look at how we kind of compare ourselves
Mhm.
versus other charters and not just our local backyard. So that was just one of the tweaks I'd say.
Okay, good. So this was actually really helpful to me to get to know you guys a little bit better too, and hear some of the dialogue that went on and so, you know, I've given you the chart. This is something you can, the longer chart. It's something you can use to sort of say, what would CSTC suggest we do here, right? But also you have the flexibility and the agility to look at all these colors and say which one best applies. And you know, if you have questions or whatever, I'm always happy to walk through scenarios with you as well. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna go to the couple slides down. I'm gonna do one more slide and then we're gonna break for lunch. One more after that. That was what you just did. So one more slide. I'm gonna actually just one more time, I'm gonna circle back to something Ting said earlier. So this is not something that appeared on your first 4 roles and responsibilities, but it's something I'd like to add to your roles and responsibilities. So again, you are all school reformers. You did not know that maybe before you came in here today, but you are. And we, and I know that Jerry from YMC, I think mentioned this to you all before as well. But we really need all of you to engage as advocates for charter schools and advocates for your charter school. So as Ting mentioned, and I also mentioned before, that most of my career was spent in the state capitol working for state legislators. So if you were coming to meet with a state legislator and I was working for her, you'd probably come meet with me first. That's usually how it's done. So those people we call advocates, right? So you come in and you're advocating. In addition, every state legislator has every assembly member and senator has a home office in their district. So they've got their capital office and they have what we call a district office. And so one of the things we've been asking our schools to do is really engage with the elected officials at their local district offices. So you call the district office, you say, hey, we're having an event. Can you come and can you bring a certificate or a resolution to honor us at this event? And they will send out staff and they will come and they will, you're building this relationship. You call the state legislator and you say, hey, you know, I know you're on your break. Love to have you come for a tour. We're doing these great things. Please come meet our families and our kids. So you bring them out here. What that does for you is that now you have a connection, right? And that's really important. I would suggest you do those same things with, and the board, you can all play a role in this with service clubs like Rotary, you know, Mr. Optimist, Lions Club. I would suggest that you do some of that with your mayors and your, you know, even though you think, well, they're not really involved in governing our school, they're not our authorizer. They all play a role and can put different pressures on your authorizer if it ever came to, you know, if there were issues with authorizing. And one by one, you're making other advocates and other charter school reformers by doing that. So that's something that I'm going to put just sort of out there for you. It not only benefits your school, it benefits the movement as a whole. And without the charter school movement, your school does not exist. Now, you'll get lots of emails from us at CSTC saying, you know, come to the Capitol and do these sorts of things too. We'd love to have you do that. You can also make that same impact without leaving home. And you can do it with your local legislators when they're in their home community. Yeah.
How do you do that without seeming like you're picking a political side? Feels like everything is political right now and it's very divided. Question.
Well, so I'll tell you that the charter school world is one of those really interesting places where a lot of us are like smack dab in the middle, right? I mean, I think that, you know, I would, if I was, sometimes I'm surprised at the people that politics makes strange bedfellows. Have you heard that expression before, right? So I would say in the charter school movement, there's a lot of strange bedfellows, right? There's people who are supportive because they love homeschools and they really hate the sort of education but they can only homeschool under a charter, right?
There's people who, like me, you know, my son went to a Montessori preschool and I loved it. I would say that otherwise, I mean, in all transparency, the people I worked for were all Democrats, right? Democrats are not always charter school supporters, but everybody I worked for was, because I took them to our school and showed them what we were doing. And they loved it, right? And we want more of this and you know, those sorts of things change votes on bills. And there's a couple of big ones that are pending now in the legislature as well. So yeah, I think you're not picking a political side because these people are already elected. You're not, I would not suggest that you try to get your school behind somebody's campaign necessarily. I'll tell you one little caveat to that, but when they're already elected, it's not politics anymore, it's governance. They're governing, you're governing, and you're trying to make some connections there. My caveat is, I have had success in Dixon and in other places, helping them to get charter school friendly board members elected to their authorizing board. So that's my only caveat. And there was an instance years ago in Dixon where a gentleman who had been not friendly to our charter school, and again, small community, lost by 36 votes, and that's because we got 400 people to turn out for his opponent, right?
Wow.
And we said we're single issue voters. We're single issue voters. You didn't do what we wanted you to do on this, you're not going to serve this capacity anymore. And so there are reasons and ways to do that, but I would say generally with your state legislators, that's not so political. So, and what was your cert for?
No, so at your, we had this conversation, so we invited them, and so they did.
Oh my God, look at that, in action, no.
And so, well, I mean, Amy was on the call too, so it wasn't.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I love that
It
it
wasn't just
happened,
me
yeah.
and you, Amy's on.
We are not passive and.
Oh, I love it.
And so they just sent one in recognition of our opening of our middle school location.
Oh, perfect,
hang that
fantastic,
in
yes,
the
yes.
middle.
You should, yeah, hang it in middle school, that's exactly right, yeah, that's great. And the more you get them engaged like that, again, it not only helps you locally, it helps the whole structure exist, so.
Yeah, just remember gas station sushi. They'll more likely ignore you unless they get to know you.
Right.
So if you know more about it, then they're more likely engaged. So it sounds like lunch isn't gonna be here for another
Oh,
maybe 15 to
okay,
20
okay,
minutes,
I can-
so.
I can keep
Are
talking.
you guys okay with just kind of moving on until lunch, is that
Okay.
way? Because we're trying to pack a lot of things in, if that's okay.
I was just going by the schedule, so.
No, I know, exactly, but I think we just got notifications a
Okay,
little bit
great.
delayed, if that's
All right.
okay.
Yeah.
Because I think this next part also will dovetail into what you were just talking about is on what mode you want to be in. And the next section is around efficiencies, about how you want to decide, part of your decision on your mode is also around how the efficiencies and how you want to engage. If you want to really be in a control mode for certain things, then you want it as the time. So then how does that happen? If it's going to be passive, then what you need in place so that you trust and can be passive. So that's the.
Great. So let's go two more slides. We're gonna pass the lunch slide. And then one more. Okay, so.
Sorry,
Yes,
and
yeah.
for just a second, just as a matter of meeting, or let me just share a note at this point. We've gone through item A, utilization of personality inventory tool and discussion of personality inventory tool results. And item B, governance training for board of directors and administration. I believe we're now moving into C, how to streamline board meetings.
That's right.
Not yet.
Yeah, and we had before that, we also had the context of chartering school as before. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, so now we're going into this, and we'll probably do whatever, 15 or 20 minutes, then we'll break for lunch, we'll come back and finish this section.
Okay.
So we'll do this, yeah. Okay. So, so we're gonna talk about effective board meetings, committee structure, and board self-review. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the things that I often recommend in streamlining board meetings and board functions is it begins before the meeting ever begins, that there's a lot of pre-work. So you're building an effective board meeting by, for instance, do you have a process for board members to suggest an agenda item? If you want an agenda item, you know how to put it on the agenda. Okay, so that's something that usually sometimes needs to be created in terms of structure. The board chair, the board president, and the executive director meet prior to the agenda being published to review content. Does that happen now? Okay, great. And then do you use the CSDC calendar or other calendar to streamline the work of the board? So to map out through the year what your board meetings are gonna look like, so it's not too heavy in one. Do you guys do that now?
There is a calendar that Kim does
Okay.
that kind of shows you like, these are what's gonna be covered these months.
Okay, great. And if you haven't seen the CSDC one, it might have other things you haven't thought about, but we think that's a great tool for just planning your meetings, even a year in advance, planning what your meetings look like. Okay, so you're also going to, at your board meetings, you're gonna apply some renewed focus to the most important board responsibilities we talked about. So you're gonna set up a process for reviewing board policies regularly. The policy I set up at the school where I set it up starting in January when I came on as board president, board chair, is that we do 2 a month. So we're going through 2 of them a month. Our executive director is going through ahead of time, picking 2, looking through them, deciding what might need to be updated, figuring out where the resources are. Is this something we have to have our legal team review? Is this something we have to have, when you see a CSDC sample policy? But either way, there's some pre-work that comes on, and it may come to us and say, you don't need to do anything, in which case what we do is at the bottom of our board policy, we just put a line that says, reviewed on this date, so that everybody knows we're not losing track of these things. And alternatively, it might be small edits, and he might bring this to us with some small edits. Or it might be, oh my gosh, we are way out of compliance on this. We got to talk about what we want this to look like. And so those things come to us 2 a month. They're always on our board meetings. I will tell you that we started with some kind of low-hanging fruit because we were like, let's just test the system, see how this works. But it's working great so far. We're in August, so it's working great, and we're getting through the policies. Okay, I mentioned this a couple times, and I've heard it up a couple times. Board goals. So what are your goals as a board? What do you think you want to do, and what do you think you can do better? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable for that? Do you think your meetings are running efficiently? Do you think your communication needs to be improved? Do you think public input needs to be a higher priority? But what are your board goals? And I can share with you, if you are interested, the school that I'm working with on Tuesday, they have a really good set of board goals. They've been, how long has Kairos been around? 15?
Oh, gosh, yeah, it's been
Yeah.
over 10 years.
So over
now.
10 years, yeah. So they've been doing this a while, and there's somebody that I think they implement a lot of really good practices, so I can share those with you if you're interested. They're going to review the board goals on Tuesday when I meet with them again. And for them, it will really just be updating some things. It's because they're sort of broad, general board goals, and they're just going to kind of remember and reflect and update those.
Can I,
Yeah.
ask for clarification when we use the term goals? So sometimes I've interacted with boards that they kind of said, they call them board goals, and they're really priority for focus areas for the organization. What I heard in the examples you just gave are board goals more around like how the board functions and operations and goals around that.
That's right.
So
That's
that's more what you're talking about.
Yes, not
Okay.
school goals, not administrative goals.
Yeah.
So the other thing you can use to do your board goals is this self-assessment. And I would look at the areas that are in yellow. Those might just be your board goals. You identified things in your self-assessment that said you need a governance handbook, right? Maybe your goal is to create a governance handbook. Your board does regular annual self-evaluation and self-assessment and makes adjustments accordingly. That might have actually been your lowest one. And there was some, it was a 1.33, so that might be something you could.
So these are, just for everybody, if you go on your Google Drive, under, and pull up the board workshop, you can click on the link and it'll take you to the board assessment.
So this was what you guys all gave us, and we just spit it into comes out. So this is just information back to you, reflecting back to you. The succession planning was one that I highlighted on here also, which was lower. Do you have a succession plan in place? I've been there. It happens when you need a succession plan. So those are things. So that's what I mean by board goals. Good question. And so I actually put that one on here. So add conversations around succession planning. And that's because there are all sorts of pieces to succession planning. It's not just anointing a new queen to come on and take the place of Kim if she were to leave, but it's how are you training people and where are you providing the training and the funding for that training? And that's very board, right? Sort of strategic planning. And are we moving people up through the process that can be in key positions if somebody else leaves? What does that look like? And how do we keep this organization functioning at such a high level all the time? We need really good people. We need them cross-trained. We need them in place. We need them hired. We need to be a place people want to work. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that go into succession planning. So thinking that through, I would suggest maybe you include some of that dialogue in your open board sessions and planning some of that out. And then creating a process, this was also reflected on your evaluation for addressing ineffective board members. You know, I have been on boards before where there was, you know, for whatever reason, there was somebody who needed some remediation or some coaching, or at one point in time, there was a board member who wasn't showing up, but luckily we had a policy in place that said, if you don't show up for 3 months in a row, we will write you a very nice letter and ask you to leave the board, right? Do you have those things in place? And do you know what they are? You may not need them now, but again, like Tina said in the beginning, you're actually setting things up for 3, 4, 5 years down the road, right? And so if you see that missing, that's something to add. Let me see if I have there. Okay, next slide, please. So, oh, sorry. I said it without looking. I'm sorry. I'm like, I just say it into the air and it happens. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so what is the role of the board chair? And before that reminds, one of my bullet points reminds me that the other thing I would suggest when you go through your board goals is also to go through this list that's on your website of roles and responsibilities. Is this what you want it to look like? Are you doing it? And there are roles and responsibilities on here for the board president, for the duties of the secretary, as well as for the board of directors. So that I think would be something I would suggest reviewing. So what your website says now is that your board chair does these two things: presides at board of directors meetings, exercises and performs other powers and duties as may be assigned. I would suggest you broaden that a little bit. I would suggest that you add that your board chair, the role of the board chair, and part of this is to make sure that whoever steps into that role, again, you're planning for the future, do they know what they're taking on? Because I just heard that you guys have a meeting once a month, right? In which Amy is the liaison from the board to the administration, right? She brings the stuff in terms of planning the agenda and having conversations. So maybe add that into your role of board chair. Ensuring that all board voices are encouraged and heard. That's really important, as we identified again with our color personality test. Not everybody is, as vocal. I feel like I'm in green, but also I might be a little on the yellow. So, and not everybody is a yellow, right? So mentoring and helping to onboard new members. What's your process for that? Do you have a designated board mentor? Because sometimes, and I mean, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but coming onto a board, you feel a little like, I don't know who to ask this question to. My question is, and it's something really basic. I was sitting next to a gentleman in a meeting the other day, and we were viewing a city council, and he said to me, "It's a consent calendar." Right? No, he doesn't have any role, super smart guy, no role in, governance, right? No idea why they were doing it and what they were even, so those sorts of things, right? You could easily come onto a board and have no idea what a consent calendar is. And then in our toolkit that I'll show you a little later on today, we charge the board chair with drafting that final written evaluation for the lead administrator's evaluation. And I will tell you that, so in my school, what we do is we have a matrix that and a rubric that comes back to me from each board member. And then I write up, and now again, none of this is a shock because we've been talking about it all year long, but I get some official documentation back from my fellow board members, and then I write that evaluation. That takes me hours of time, because I'm really trying to be reflective about what everybody said, and people make comments. I'm trying to put the comments also in the evaluation. So I think it's fair to let a new board chair know that you're going to get hammered with this at the end of the year. And it's a valuable use of your time, but also part of your duties. So questions about role of the board chair? Board chair, any questions? Thoughts? Okay. All right, next slide. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Lunch got covered, so I think
I'm I'm looking at my, okay. So this is a chance for us to look at, some of our management versus governance that we talked about before, roles and responsibilities of management versus governance. So if we have a new member hypothetically coming on today, what has been done to onboard him and whose job really is that? So, our sort of best practices are that we would suggest that the executive director, the management, the lead administrator make sure that in that first meeting, they have all of the documents and links to documents, that Google Drive you're talking about, Delight, that, those sorts of things are available, access, email access, making sure that the new board member receives the board calendar, you've passed a calendar, what dates are you supposed to show up here? And having that sort of pre-meeting to answer questions, maybe give a school tour if you're not a parent. And I would encourage you, sort of sidebar, but I would encourage you to encourage people who are not parents to be on your board. They're very valuable and they bring a lot of things, maybe from your community. So as a thought. The board governance. So do you have a set of board norms? Have you created board norms?
We've had versions,
Okay.
not currently.
Okay, so that may be something you want to look at as board norms. You may be able to operate without it. When at one point in time, I was on a board where we were all parents and we had a board norm, written down board norm that you could look at your phone if it was your kids calling, right? You could get up and leave if you needed to. I mean, and we just felt like it was important. We were a school and we had kids in school and we felt like it was important to acknowledge that that happens. And please don't be surfing Facebook or, whatever, but yes, sometimes this happens. And more, so if you have norms, sharing those norms, if you don't have norms, thinking about creating them. Another role for governance, the governance team, mostly the board president, would be to offer assistance and information about protocol procedures. So you've been reading Robert's Rules of Order. Those are the protocol procedures, right? But not everybody knows those.
Handbook says that's what we use. So.
Yes.
Yeah, and do you use it?
Yes.
Is that accurate? Okay. I was saying, just a suggestion, Rosenberg's Rules of Order, it's only 2 pages, much more easily digestible. It's on our website. I have a 1-pager or 2-pager on that. And it was created by a gentleman who was a judge in Yolo County, among other things, but it's much less cumbersome. Very similar style, much less cumbersome.
It said that school boards usually use that.
They do. Yes, that is true. Yes, that's accurate. Yeah. So it's been an evolution over years. And part of that is just, I think, as we have become more inclusive, right? Trying to get people to have conversations with us and not get so lost in the, what are they saying or what are they doing or what's a procedural or, tabling or, all of those sorts of things. Trying to be more inclusive of not only board members, but also the public. So yeah, it's on our website, Rosenberg's Rules of Orders. And then mentoring, helping to onboard new board members is another governance role. And encouraging the new board members to find their voice and ask questions is, sort of a role of the whole board, right? And getting other voices at the table. So next slide, please, Steve. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit into talking, and I heard you talk a little bit about committees. We're going to talk a little bit about the value of committees. What things might not be committees, and then I'm going to sort of walk you through, I'm not sure if we'll get there before lunch, but a little process that I suggest. So a traditional committee role is that the board member on the committee, acts with the authority of the board. I am representing the board voice in this. The meetings are always subject to the Brown Act because you have board members on there and it's a decision-making body. When the board appoints a committee, it becomes a decision-making body. So that's important to make sure that meetings are open to the public and agendas go out. The traditional committee role will report to the board with formal updates, findings, or recommendations. So they'll come with board committee reports. You guys will vote on them. Another mode to consider is this board member liaison role. So sometimes in this way, sometimes we also call these like superintendent work groups or, some sort of work groups. Board members will attend to share information, observe, or offer support, but they're not speaking with that authority of the board. They're sort of one person who has been hearing the things about the board, who's sharing the information they have. And finding out maybe ways the board as a whole could serve in that way. They don't speak on behalf of the board, and there's not a Brown Act meeting required there because there's also no quorum. One of the ways that I have used this board member liaison role, at one point in time, we were coming up with a new logo for the Dixon Unified School District. And so we wanted student voices and board voices and parent voices, and this was gonna be a wholesale change from like the 70s, right? So it was a big change. Oddly, on the original one, there was a random cornucopia of knowledge of grapes, I don't know, but anyway, so it's a whole switch over, what do we look like now? And that was a great role for me to be a board member liaison. It was not a committee of the board. We did come back and show some options and give a report, but it was a much more informal way to share information and offer support. So those are two modes. Do you want to break? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So the board member liaison, is that something that is decided by the board that a board member will take that on? Or is that something that the executive director just asks for a board member to do? Like, how does that board member liaison usually come to be?
It usually comes to be from somebody volunteering in a board, so the executive director comes and says, okay, you guys have decided that you want a new logo. And here's the process that I've developed so that we can internally manage this. And I'm gonna pull together a work group. I would love to have somebody from the board serve on that work group. Who would that be? So that's how that comes to be, right?
Okay.
Things like that. Might be, do you have any suggestions of other ways that it might?
No, or you can also just appoint somebody as a liaison.
Right.
If you like, instead of the finance committee, you can say finance liaison. Because here's the thing is I also serve on the board, and what we are finding is that we had lots of committees and all that. We didn't have to follow the Brown Act because it was a private board. But what we were finding was that we were basically rehashing everything the committee's conversation when we brought it to the larger
Right,
board.
because everybody still wanted to talk.
So you're kind of having the same conversation, and if you are a board of 5 people and you've got 2 of them, you're almost a quorum, not quite,
Mhm.
but you're having a committee and you're doing all this conversations and you're meeting and you're doing all this stuff, then you come to the board and the board is like then having another conversation around it. Then that's like, is that the time, or you have the committee that's making the recommendation and you just need to trust, you've given the time, they've put in the time,
Mhm.
then I'm not saying rubber stamp, but not ask questions, but just say, hey, we don't need to drill down to the level that you have to trust that the committee already had that conversation. So you have to find that balance, or just do a liaison and save yourself the time of Brown Act and all that stuff. And then you can have the liaison report to the larger board and have that discussion at the board with the entire board.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Can I ask one more question around that?
Yeah.
Can you have 2 people do it? Because if now we're 5, so you could technically
have
have
2,
2.
right.
Okay, so you don't get majority of the board.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
there's a nuance here that
Yeah.
it took me a few times hearing this from the legal counsel we work with at CSDC. But if the board has designated a committee, even if there's not a quorum, you need to have a Brown Act. You need to have the agenda, you need to have the open to the public. Because you're acting with the authority of the board.
Mhm.
So yes, you could have 2 as a liaison, right? And you
Yeah.
would not be, because you're not acting with the authority of the board. But if you get 2 in a committee role, suddenly you're into all
Yeah.
the other stuff.
Thank you. I just wanted that.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially for the newer members.
Yeah.
So.
All
What
right,
does
so-
that mean? Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
But like acting with the authority of the board without a quorum means what?
I think means making decisions, we're gonna ask for this, the board has given the committee some authority. And it should be spelled out what that authority is, but let's say Kim has come with several different kinds of data collection systems. And you have a board committee reviewing those, and the board says, the board committee says, these are our top 2, or this is our recommendation, this is our one recommendation. So, and then you come to the board, you say, this is our recommendation. So those are the things you have reviewed that with the eyes of the board, even though there were only 2 of you. And now you're bringing back a recommendation based on all the information you've gathered.
So another example is like the finance committee reviews the budgets before they come to the board, so that when you guys are looking at it, you already know if there's a second set of eyes.
But if there was one person that was designated as a liaison, that doesn't have the authority of the board.
Right, right. They would be coming and saying, hey, I found these things, but I'm assuming the finance committee comes and says, we looked at it, budget's good.
Mhm.
Yeah. The questions. Okay, all right, we'll break for lunch
Yeah.
and we'll come back.
Break for lunch. Can I just note before you turn us off? So we're breaking for lunch at 12:14 and we will plan to return when, how long ago? 12:40. At 12:40, okay, we'll reconvene at 12:40.
Either way,
All four.
so you want me to do more than one, or do you wanna?
Just one.
Back here.
And then I can keep it.
We're back live, we're reconvening now, it's 12:47, and we are still in items for presentation and discussion. C, and then we will continue with D, E, and F.
Okay, so bringing it back to committees again. I'm gonna make an argument why you should have fewer committees, and I don't know how many you have, but I'm just gonna make an argument that you could probably have fewer than you do. So one is, as we talked about earlier, the ability to be agile in a fast changing environment. So if it has to go back to committee, if your board only meets once a month and then the committee meets after that, or maybe meets, making sure that if you have something you really want to have discussed and in a dynamic environment of enrollment and funding and those sorts of, that's okay. So we want to make sure that the school can respond quickly. So putting fewer things into that committee bucket. Better use of volunteer time. So all of you are volunteers, right? And you have limited amounts of time you can dedicate to this volunteer activity. So making sure again that you're not having the discussion in a board committee and then bringing it back and having the discussion in the full committee, maybe that instead you're having the discussion in the full committee and only taking one bite out of that particular apple. And again, when you bring it back to the full board, you have more involvement in key decisions. So, making sure that more eyes are on the topic, that you're really getting into a deep discussion about some of those things. Fewer committees can actually sort of have board members not be as well informed and engaged as they could be. Next slide, please. So one of the tools I'm going to offer you is something that we call a zero-based committee structure. It's also in the book, the Charter School Handbook book. You can talk to you a little bit more about it. But what you do when you review your committees, and you might do this beginning of the year when you're setting your board calendar and electing your president and those sorts of things, you review your committees from zero. You start with no committees. And then you say, what should we now add in? What was of value to us in the last year? You don't say, okay, we've got finance and academics and fundraising, and what else should we add, right? You start from zero. And so in that way, every committee is created with a really specific purpose. It's not, oh, why are we doing this charter school advisory committee? It's not serving us anymore. We don't need that anymore. It reduces some unnecessary meetings, and it allows you to be a little more responsive and agile. Next slide. And any questions about zero-based committee structure? So it's just one tool to create your committees, and you may come up with exactly the same number of committees, but it's a different way to review it. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about why boards should examine their own work. So you have a section on today about goal setting. Can help you really refocus if you're reviewing your own work. A goal setting process, a review process like we did in this way, can really help you to decide what things you need to strengthen, what things you're already doing really well. I'll tell you just a funny thing. The other day I had a board fill this out and they gave themselves all greens. Everything is green, everything is perfect. I was like, well, that's what you need to reflect on. Are you doing this perfectly, all of it? Or are some people not understanding what I'm asking? Those sorts of things. So it's only happened once in all the ones I've done, but it can also, again, remember that we're schools, right? So we need to model continuous improvement. We need to model learning. We need to model, thinking differently. And reviewing it can also ensure long-term sustainability. When you look at, we have a tool on our website where you can get on there at some point in time. We also have a tool we call the board composition chart. Dixon Montessori just went through the board composition chart, and we identified that one person we don't have on our team, on our board team, is anybody with any sort of land use or real estate, or we don't have anybody with those those tools. And it's helpful to have that voice in your conversation. So we have 2 board openings right now, and we specifically put out a message saying, we'll look at everybody's applications. We're really looking for, in other things, we're really looking for this particular skill set. So that's helpful too in terms of your long-term sustainability for the school. Okay, next slide. Now I'm going to jump into this toolkit I've been mentioning before, which I'm hoping is live on our website, fingers crossed, but soon will be if it's not now. And it's a new tool that we have created to help understand my original goal. We had an old toolkit and people told us it was too long and too cumbersome. And so my goal was to condense it. And really, I don't know that I condensed it, but I do think we improved it. It's just a really big process to do it well. So next slide, please. So one of the things, I think you have to ask yourself is our current evaluation system working? And if it's working and if you're getting the results you need, maybe no need to change it. But you could talk about, are you really offering the right sort of support for your lead administrator? And one of the things that I thought was really fascinating in doing this work is that it's actually this third one here, is that leaders that did not have ongoing dialogue with colleagues showed improvement that barely exceeded random chance. So you can do all this work and have zero outcome improvement, right? Because you're not doing it the correct way. So we know that from research that leaders who discussed their own improvement priorities with their coworkers or with their board, and then regularly followed up, showed a lot of improvement. The toolkit that we've created provides resources to really surround a lead administrator with non-evaluative or support-only resources as well. So some of this isn't evaluation, some of this is just feedback or support. And those people can be, a trusted CSDC mentor or a board member or an external coach or, anybody who might offer that kind of support. Next slide, please. This is the timeline for doing this sort of evaluation. Again, this is all part of our toolkit, and I'm just kind of walking you through it as you guys, I understand, are wrapping up this year's, maybe something for you to consider starting next month. So in, late September, you're going to look at the data that's coming in. You're going to, review that data. You're going to figure out some goal setting for the lead administrator. And then as the year progresses, you're going to meet periodically. You're going to do feedback and feed forward. So things that are coming up that you want to, talk about or support, growth that you want to support. And then you're probably, there may be, like I said, a mentor or something that you're meeting periodically for that. But along the way, the board is also checking in along the way and saying, we're really seeing this and we're thrilled by this. And can we do more of it? What's more of this? And then in the end, through this process, and also embedded in there are school surveys and community surveys. There's also, regular sort of, this is where you're going to collect the staff surveys and community surveys in there, and other regular sort of feedback from the school community. Next slide.
And this really parallels, that parallels your LCAT process as well. So you're getting feedback. So this aligns really, really well for your evaluation of your administrator, as well as setting goals and establishing what you need as an organization.
And so you're going to start, and we did not even check in on this, but my first thing, number one, preparing is mutual trust. Yes.
So the feedback that you're soliciting is on me.
Yes, well, on you, on the goals that were set, are we, for instance, you might say, are teachers feeling heard, right? And so you send out a survey to the teachers, are the teachers feeling heard? Is there a better process we can help create or surround you with in that process to make sure that happens? Those sorts of things. We have some sample survey questions, and so you can look at some of those. Other questions? So you're going to do the actions are you're going to distribute the toolkit overview, and you're going to adopt this timeline. And then really you're going to clarify that this is a 2-track system. So part of it is a formal evaluation of the board, by the board of the lead administrator tied to performance goals. That's the sort of formal part. The more informal part is this development, wraparound, ongoing support. What do you need? Do we need to provide more money in this way? I mentioned earlier the executive director at our school, we identified, you need an executive assistant. So board has to shift some money somewhere to make that happen, right? But we think that's a priority to make him perform at his highest level. And what we want is for him to perform at his highest level, because, really high quality executive directors are hard to come by. And, and so we need to support them in this role. Next slide. Setting clear expectations, and this is that evaluation track. So you're defining success through shared performance metrics. So you're saying, here's our goal, here's what we're going to measure you on. And then your rubric aligns with that. So it says, we've looked at these things, we've set this goal, we've said that, a 20% increase in staff feedback, or something is going to be helpful. And then we're going to evaluate on that along the way. You're going to look at the strategic plan and the LCAP to help identify some metrics. And then the goals you set are goals you set together. So the board's not going to come in and say, this is our plate of things for you to do, right? You guys are going to collaborate as a governance team, and you're going to say, what sort of things would further the mission of the school? How can we be better together at what we do? And so then you're going to set some goals, and Kim's going to go in her management role and carry out those goals. And then again, you're gonna look at this every trimester. There's no surprises. You're going through the process. And if at the first trimester you don't see the support you need, you're gonna, as a board, reevaluate how you can provide that support. Next slide. On the feedback track, which again is the more informal sort of providing feedback, and some of this comes from, you'll see it more spelled out in the toolkit. But again, it's, feed forward as opposed to feedback. So you're not correcting and saying, I didn't like when you did this little thing on here. You're saying, this is what you're doing well. How can we support you to do more of it, right? And so you're going to do the lead administrator